Story 1.
My friend empowered me to cheat and open my marriage, only for my husband to turn the tables on me. Jack, yeah, she thought she was being sneaky, but what she didn't know was that I had learned about all of this from a colleague of hers who was disgusted by what was happening. I made my plans and got ready. Fortunately, I had time to manage the anger and prepare for what was about to unfold. It would all kick off tonight, right after dinner. "Kayla, tonight then?" Mary, my friend, inquired. "Yeah, I'm finally going to do it. I'll wait until after dinner, hand him a beer, and then I'll fill you in on what happens," I replied. "Just remember to stay strong. He won't like it, but you have to remain firm." "I'll keep that in mind, just as we discussed. He doesn't have a choice. This is how it's going to be. And if he truly loves me, he'll let me do this for my happiness." "That's right. Just be prepared for him to yell and scream. He'll resist, but eventually, he'll come to his senses and accept the new reality. It's crucial that you stay calm but firm. Let him have his tantrum, and then he'll realize that you're in charge." "That's right. Besides, as far as he knows, this will only be temporary. Once he accepts it, he'll start to enjoy it. Then it'll just keep going." "Are you sure about all this? Jack can be very stubborn. Look, Kayla, Jack loves you more than anything in the world. Sure, he'll get angry, but when he calms down, he'll realize that he loves you so much that he'll do anything to make you happy, even that." "Okay, I think you're the expert. Trust me, it took me messing up 2 marriages to figure it all out, but I perfected the method on my 3rd marriage. You've met my current husband. He is now completely under my control. He even stands next to the bed when I'm with someone else. I also sometimes have him clean up afterward. A month from now, another Jack will get in line as well. Then you can be assured of the security of your marriage to Jack, as well as the pleasure of several other men." I finished the day and went home to cook Jack's favorite dinner. When Jack came home, he greeted me with the words "I love you" and kissed me on the cheek as usual. Despite my best efforts, I was still nervous. This was going to be a significant step and change in our marriage, but it was all worth it. Mary had been telling me about her feminine marriage ministry for quite some time now. I have personally seen it work for her and her husband. He was really happy with how their marriage turned out. I'm sure Jack would love it too. The conversation over dinner was pleasant. We exchanged stories from the previous day and discussed some of the day's news. It was a laid-back dinner for us. After dinner, I insisted that he grab a beer and relax while I cleaned up. He resisted a bit, wanting to help, but I assured him it wasn't much and I could handle it. The leftovers were stored. The dishes went into the dishwasher, and it was time. I poured myself a glass of wine, mentally prepared, and headed into the living room for the conversation. "Jack, honey, we need to talk," I began. "Sure, honey, about what?" "Okay, Jack, I realize this might be difficult for you to accept right now, but it's something I really need to do. Please keep in mind that this is only temporary." "Okay, so what do you need?" "If it's that crucial to your happiness, of course, I'll do what I can." So far, he had handled it well, not even bothered. That's good. We've discussed having kids, and I'm almost ready for that, but there are a couple of other things I need to do first. It should take a couple of months at most, then we can start working on having kids. "That's great, baby. So what are those things you need to do?" "Here it is." I took a deep breath, preparing for the reaction. "Well, Jack, I need to explore a bit before settling down completely. It will be temporary, and then I can be the best wife and mother to our children you could dream of." "All right, my love. That sounds reasonable so far, but how are you planning to go about it?" Wow, he's handling it well. I expected him to freak out. "I'll be seeing other men for a while. We'll still make love regularly, but I'll also have lovemaking with other guys to clear my head. Remember, it's only lovemaking with them. You are the only one who has my love. I'll return to you in a couple of months, be your faithful wife again, and then we can start working on having the kids we've planned." "Well, Kayla, you don't seem to be asking for my permission, so I assume you've made up your mind." "I'd like to go on record saying I'm not in favor of it. If you're asking for permission, I'm not giving it. However, you're a grown woman, so I won't stop you if you think it's necessary." Things were going better than I imagined. He didn't raise his voice, said it conversationally. Mary must be right. Jack will accept the new role I'm preparing him for. "So Kayla, how will this work? Are you moving out, or do you expect me to? Are you bringing them here or going to their place or a hotel?" "Oh, well, we're both going to keep living here. Well, we're married, and as I said, we'll keep making love. The other guys will just be love-making. With you, it will be making love. I may go to them or bring them here. In those cases, you'll have to sleep in the spare bedroom. I don't see the need for a hotel room since we could just stay here. Again, I'm not in favor, but we shouldn't have lovemaking during this. I won't risk catching any STDs. Once you're done, we'll wait until you're tested and cleared. Have fun. Don't worry about me." Well, Jack can't say I'm not disappointed. I love you and enjoy our lovemaking, but I understand your concern. I'll just have to live with it. That's great, honey. So when do you plan to start your little flings? Well, Mary and I decided to hit a club and meet a couple of guys from work tomorrow night. I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but I might bring one of them back for the night. Since you're not going to have lovemaking with me while I'm doing it anyway, maybe it would be best if you just move into the spare room for the next couple of months. Okay, Kayla, don't worry about it. I'll take care of moving in by the time you get home tomorrow night, Jack said before returning to reading the paper. I couldn't believe how mature he was about the whole thing. My heart soared. Sure, he weakly complained and refused lovemaking, but he was completely accepting of everything. He wasn't even the least bit angry. Mary was definitely right. In 2 months, Jack would be under my thumb. Besides, I knew this lack of lovemaking was only temporary. In a week or two, he'd be back in my bed. Then I would just use the final wrench to get him to fully embrace his new role as my submissive little hubby. Update. Hi, Mary, it's Kayla. Hey, girl, so how'd it go last night? Oh my God, you wouldn't believe how mature Jack was about everything. I expected him to go nuclear, but he didn't even raise his voice. He was just so calm and accepting of it all. Wow, that's great. I told you he'd comply. Do you think you could be able to convince him to watch tonight? I doubt it. In fact, I don't think I'll even suggest it. He said he'd refuse to have lovemaking with me while I'm with someone else. I'm sure that won't last long. After a week or two of using his hands, knowing he has a beautiful woman by his side, he'll be right back. That could be a lot of fun. Since he refused to touch me, I just went ahead and made him move to the spare room. He's packing his things now. He promised me that he would completely move out of the owner's bedroom before I came home tonight. Ha! I love that you changed the name from master bedroom to owner's bedroom. I'm going to have to start doing that myself. Oh, definitely. Anyway, I should probably get ready. I'll meet you at the club. Okay, bye. Later that night, Jack had made pretty good progress on boxing up all the stuff from my bedroom. I wasn't sure why he really needed to pack when he could just carry armfuls of stuff down the hall, but he explained that it was better that way. It would be less walking, and he could go through everything and leave the things he really didn't need in boxes to get rid of. I guess that made some sense, but I was too busy getting ready to pay attention. He did say how seductive I looked in my underwear, garter belt, stockings, and 5-inch loafers. He said nothing when I wore the little red cocktail dress I got for our 5th anniversary last year. That was actually the only time I wore it, but I looked damn good in it. I informed Jack that I was going out and expected to return around 1 a.m. I mentioned that he didn't need to wait for me as I might not be alone. After saying this, I picked up my clutch and prepared to leave. He assured me not to worry, mentioning that he would have moved out by the time I returned. As he made this promise, he closed the last box. As I left the house, a sense of unease lingered within me, though I couldn't quite identify its source. Despite this, I chose to dismiss it, directing my focus towards the anticipated fun and excitement of the night. At the club, I encountered Mary, Larry, and Josh, the account managers known for their attractiveness and reputed endowment, according to Mary and some of the other office girls. While Jack was moderately endowed, the thought of experiencing a considerably larger member intrigued me, with the added expectation that they knew how to use their assets effectively. In the midst of conversation, Mary asked about Jack's move to the spare bedroom. When our first order arrived, I confirmed that he had completed packing and assured me of being entirely moved out by the time I returned. Upon sharing this information, Josh questioned if Jack had indeed made such a statement. I affirmed, recalling Jack's words when I mentioned my expected return time. Our group burst into laughter at the remark, and Larry humorously expressed disappointment about Jack having moved out, as he was hoping to involve him in a carnal setting. I playfully suggested that, perhaps after some persuasion, we could consider such arrangements. In the midst of the banter, I observed that neither Larry nor Josh had extended an invitation to dance. Over the course of several hours, we engaged in dancing and indulged in drinks. I danced with both of them on multiple occasions, particularly during slow songs where we embraced closely, feeling their hardness against me. Throughout the night, their hands remained on my backside. Later, Mary and I took a break and went to the ladies' room to discuss the conclusion of the night. We decided the outcome of the ride home through 3 rounds of rock, paper, scissors, resulting in me driving Josh and Mary accompanying Larry. Upon arriving at the house, I led Josh through the front door, noticing that it was dark inside. I assumed Jack had retired to bed by then, reassuring myself that everything was in order. Anyway, we didn't need him watching. I led Josh down the hall to my room. Of course, all of Jack's stuff was gone. Maybe I should reward him by offering him a hand job. That would be something to think about later. Right now, I had other things requiring my attention. It didn't take us long to undress, but Josh wanted me to keep the garter belt and stockings on. I'd lost my thong a couple of hours ago, unsure if it was Larry's or Josh's. It didn't matter, I made enough money to buy others. The next 2 hours were sheer bliss. We started with one position, then switched to another one to avoid exhaustion too quickly. We finished that round with cowgirl. After a brief rest, I enjoyed when he spanked my ass while I rode him. Maybe I'll let Jack do it on his birthday, or our anniversary, but it wouldn't happen again. I'd save it for my other lovers. We ended up in the shower before going to bed, and again when we woke up the next morning. After that, Josh had to leave for his wife and kids, so I put on my robe and went to get some coffee. I felt a bit let down that Jack hadn't brewed coffee yet, considering it was already past 9. Typically, he'd be up for an hour by now. I planned to address it with him later. I mean, would it hurt him to make me coffee and breakfast, especially after I stayed up late? So much for the handiwork I was going to offer him as a reward for moving into the spare bedroom while I was away. After devouring my breakfast bagel, I headed to the shower and got dressed. The warm water did wonders for soothing my sore muscles. Since I had no plans for the day, I opted for my old shorts and a t-shirt. As I was only going to be around Jack, I wore a functional bra and an old pair of regular underwear. Just as I finished tying my hair into a ponytail, the phone rang. "Hey, girlfriend." It was Mary. "Hey, seductive thing. So, how was Josh last night?" "He was amazing. It was exactly as I thought it would be." Speaking of Jack, what was his reaction this morning? "I don't know. I'm a little angry because he seems to be asleep. I was disappointed that he didn't make me breakfast and coffee this morning. I was thinking of offering him a part-time job for moving into the spare room, but now I don't think so. Yes, make sure he knows how disappointed you are and what you expect from this moment. Continue to be aggressive with him, but make sure you give him small rewards when he does something good. This will give him the incentive to try harder." I'm actually starting to get angry that he still hasn't gotten up. Wait a minute while I get his lazy ass out of bed. I walked down the hall to the spare bedroom and pounded on the door, shouting his name. No response. I tried again, still no answer. Finally, I turned the knob and swung the door open. "Oh crap," I exclaimed. "What's wrong?" Mary asked on the phone. "Jack isn't in the spare bedroom. His clothes aren't even in the closet." "Wait," I said, running through the house. "Crap, his truck is gone, as are all his tools." That little stirring in the back of my head was starting to take shape. "Oh no," I gasped. What is it?" Mary asked. "Jack moved out. Now I understand what he was talking about. He never said he would move his stuff into the spare room. He only said he would move his stuff out of my room. Then he said he would move in before I returned. I thought he meant he would move out of my room, but he meant he would move out of the whole house. Crap, I need to call him and find out where he's gone. No, this is wrong. It sends him a message of weakness. You have to stay strong. Don't contact him. Let him contact you. Trust me, right now he's just having a little tantrum. In a couple of days, he'll come crawling back to you. This is actually a very good thing. Now you have a reason to punish him and make him beg to do something for you to let him come back. It speeds up the process. I bet you could even let Josh or Larry knock you up and make Jack raise the baby. Are you sure about that? I'm sure. Look what my husband does for me. Well, I have to admit, you've been right so far. Of course I am. Oh, and Larry wants to meet you in the supply closet at work for an hour on Monday. Can we really get away with that? Sure, at least half the girls are doing it. It's so bad I have to do it on a schedule. I'll email you the meeting time. Just put it down as an appointment somewhere else. Don't worry about it. The boss never goes there, and everyone who needs something there knows to ask me before going to get something. We continued our conversation for a bit longer before ending the call. I must confess, I felt a bit uneasy about Jack's move. Despite my actions, I genuinely love him and envisioned spending my life with him. Mary's portrayal of a feminine lifestyle sounded appealing, offering me the opportunity to explore various men. Eventually, I plan to give up other relationships, but Jack will remain my devoted and submissive spouse. Perhaps in a few years, I can negotiate with Jack to let me tie him down in exchange for ceasing involvement with other men. Of course, this will only happen when I'm ready to give it up, and he doesn't need to know that. Yes, I could use binding as a condition for his return. I'd need to consider that. Regardless, I needed to recover from the previous night and brace myself for a demanding day at work tomorrow. I shrugged it off, prepared a simple dinner, enjoyed a glass of wine, and went to bed. Throughout the week, there was no word from Jack. Mary assured me it wasn't entirely unexpected and predicted he would contact me soon. The longer he stayed away, the more conditions I could establish for his return. This week, I'd been meeting Larry, Josh, and a couple of other attractive guys in the pantry every day, with a double team session with Larry and Josh scheduled for this afternoon. On Friday morning, During our break around the coffee machine, Larry, Josh, Mary, and I engaged in conversation. Suddenly, a professionally dressed woman approached and inquired if we were Kayla Adams, Mary Morgan, Josh Johnson, and Larry Jones. After introducing ourselves, she handed each of us an envelope and quickly took pictures with a small digital camera. She mentioned that we had all been served and then headed towards our boss's office. I called after her, asking what it was about, and she responded in a sweet southern voice that she was paid to distribute them, not to read them. She entered the boss's office without knocking. Less than a minute later, she cheerfully left the building, wishing us a good day. Simultaneously, we opened our envelopes, discovering divorce papers citing spousal cheating as the reason. I was frozen in shock. Josh and Larry's phones rang shortly after. Their wives, having received proof of their infidelity, were about to toss their belongings out. Divorce papers were imminent. Our boss's voice boomed from the office, expressing frustration. He suddenly appeared in the doorway, yelling loudly enough for the entire office to hear. He called for Adams, Morgan, Johnson, and Jones to come into his office immediately. A sense of foreboding settled over me as we walked past him with bowed heads and entered his office, the door slamming behind us. Once inside, he conveyed his discontent, emphasizing that the situation was beyond just bad. He demanded an explanation while waving a manila envelope, but none of us dared to speak. He proceeded to inform us that the company was facing a lawsuit for not adhering to the moral code outlined in our employee handbook. He questioned whether any of us could fathom the reason behind such legal action. Once again, we found ourselves unable to respond. He took it upon himself to explain the situation, stating that the lawsuit revolved around allegations against Mrs. Adams, Mr. Jones, and Mr. Johnson for inappropriate conduct, while Mrs. Morgan was accused of transforming the storage room into a company brothel. He challenged us to deny these allegations and questioned if any of these incidents occurred during business hours or on company property. With no response from us, he expressed frustration and criticized our actions, stating that the court order prevented him from firing us until the case was settled. He instructed us to leave his office until he figured out how to handle the situation. With our heads down, we left his office and made our way to our room. Following that incident, my job became significantly challenging, but I was grateful to still have employment. Deciding to assess the divorce papers, I discovered their severity, containing images, videos, audio recordings, and even notarized letters. An hour later, a company-wide email arrived from the boss addressing all employees. Management had become aware that employees had repeatedly planned and executed actions contrary to the moral code of conduct detailed in the employee handbook during work hours and on company property. Considering the likelihood of the problem being more widespread than documented, drastic action was announced. Due to uncertainty about which employees were involved, all employees were required to familiarize themselves with the Code of Morals in the employee handbook. An online class would be developed over the weekend, and every employee must successfully complete it by the following Friday. Security would conduct spot checks of all secluded areas throughout the day, a measure to be repeated until permanent security cameras were installed for monitoring. Subsequently, the storage room would be locked and the key held by the security supervisor. Any necessary supplies must be brought in with a security escort. The security supervisor would closely monitor computer use to prevent personal use of company assets. Prohibited activities included scheduling non-work-related meetings with coworkers or others, browsing non-work-related websites, and non-work-related text messaging on company computers. Socializing with coworkers should be confined to the break room during scheduled breaks and lunch periods. Security personnel would roam the building to monitor compliance, and the names of those responsible for the actions would not be disclosed. 2 minutes later, my email exploded with hate mail from CO workers. After work, the other three and I met at a bar across the street. Seated at a small table in the corner, we faced disapproving looks from other CO workers during Friday happy hour. At least we still had work to do, at least for a while. That was very nice of him. Why do you think Jack included that in the court order? I asked, referencing the clause that kept us from being fired immediately. Josh dismissed it, suggesting that Jack wasn't trying to cause minimal damage but rather intended to inflict more pain. I sought clarification, and Josh explained the reference to alimony. He mentioned that while infidelity was the current reason for the divorce, having a stable job and income could prevent a judge from awarding alimony. He cautioned against the risk of not finding another job if laid off, potentially convincing a sympathetic judge to provide financial assistance. The advice was to stay at the job until the divorce was final. Larry raised a scenario after the divorce, suggesting that if all four of us were laid off, there could be no alimony and no job. Josh responded that in such a case, he would resign on Monday. Larry made a joking comment about being a natural blonde, implying that resigning voluntarily could have legal repercussions. He explained that resigning after filing for divorce might be perceived as an attempt to receive support from the ex-spouse, and it could lead to negative judgments from a judge. The recommended course of action was to hold on to the job and save money. Josh expressed concern about his and my situation, emphasizing that their wives might receive alimony and child support due to having children. He pondered the challenges they would face if laid off, considering that alimony and child support were determined based on income at the time of the divorce. The situation sounded far from promising. Realizing the potential consequences, I felt the need to talk to Jack and attempt to resolve our issues. Despite wanting to assist my friends, the thought of losing my husband made me reconsider my priorities. In a moment of self-reflection, I questioned my initial intentions and concluded that if I needed to prioritize my marriage over my friendships, I would do whatever it took to save it. I swiftly retrieved my cell phone and encountered a message stating that the number I dialed did not accept calls from my number. Frustrated, I requested Mary's phone, explaining that Jack had blocked my number and I needed to discuss the situation with him. After attempting to call him on Mary's phone and receiving the same message, it became evident that he had also blocked her number. When suggested to try Larry's phone, I hesitated, expressing concern about the potential consequences of calling my husband from one of my friends' phones. Acknowledging the difficulty in reaching him by phone, I felt a sense of panic, considering that Jack had likely blocked my home and work phones as well. Realizing that talking on the phone might not be effective, I decided to seek him out in person. The urgency to find him and address the situation face-to-face took precedence over any concerns about societal expectations for women in marriage. Reflecting on the changes in my perspective, I recognized that just that morning, I had entertained thoughts of making Jack beg and grovel to come home. Now the tables had turned, and I found myself uncertain of the roles we would play in the resolution of our situation. I picked up my phone and started going through my contacts. Sure enough, at least one of his friends would know where I could find him. Spoiler: none of our mutual friends knew anything. Well, that wasn't exactly true. None of the previous mutual friends who remained friends with me knew anything. The numerous mutual friends who now hated me knew enough. Unfortunately, while they had no reservations about letting me know they knew where I could find him, they defiantly refused to reveal that information to me. I was met with laughter when I asked if they'd give him a message from me. I had just dejectedly finished my last call and fourth drink when Josh showed his intelligence. Yes, it was said sarcastically. Maybe it was just my mood or the result of the differences between how a woman thinks and how a man thinks. Perhaps some of you will think that what Josh suggested was really brilliant. Me? I don't think so. Well, Josh began, since our lives are already messed up, why don't we go to Kayla's and spend the whole night as a foursome? We've already been carnal, so we can take advantage of that and have a night of passion. He thought that was sound logic, maybe to him, but I just received a big dose of common sense. Of course, if there's nothing left to lose, there might be something to think about. Personally, I think Jack and I still have a tiny chance. That tiny chance would evaporate faster than a drop of water on the surface of the sun if I took everyone into the house and had a late-night gathering with them. I politely declined and offered to let Mary take them home. I had a husband I was trying to get back. I tried everything to find Jack. On weekends, I drove around motel parking lots for hours looking for his truck. I drove past all his friends' houses at different times to see if his truck was there. I even tried to follow his best friend when I saw him leaving his house, hoping he would go to where Jack was. It was all in vain. Monday morning, I camped across the street from his work. Everyone came in, but Jack never showed up. I waited another hour, still nothing. Even though I was already late for work, I didn't care. Screw it. They weren't going to fire me right now anyway, and I'd still get fired after the settlement. But that didn't matter. I got out of the car and headed for the office. I saw that the door to Jack's office was closed, so I asked the receptionist if Jack was here. She told me he was gone for 2 weeks. Crap. The boss threw me an angry look when I walked in 2 hours late. I didn't care. All the phones I could have used were blocked. His friends refused to help. I can't even get a message to him at work. I have no idea where he is, so I can't show up on his doorstep. Mail is not an option because I have no idea where to send it. What are my options? Email. He always checks email. I just have to hope he doesn't block my emails. No problem with attempting, Jack. No excuses. Won't waste time trying to provide one. I've contracted the fool's disease, my decision, not blaming Mary. It was wonderful hearing her talk about women's marriage. No idea why I thought there was a chance you'd accept. Should have known better. Sorry for needing a wake-up call, but now I'm awake. I want you to know I'm deeply embarrassed and regret my actions. I understand you may not accept it. Jack, despite my recent actions, I truly love you completely. You did nothing wrong, It was me being an incredible idiot and selfish. Jack, my love. Even though I don't deserve it, I beg you to forgive me. I need to come back. I'm willing to give you anything. I realized the foolishness of trying to create FM, but I'd be thrilled to be part of MLF. Yes, Jack, I'm giving you my soul, and you're just giving me orders. I'll literally do anything to get back to where I belong, with you. I know the definition of anything. Please, Jack, I'm offering you anything. Despite no interest in women, I'll do things for you, serve you and friends at a Super Bowl party in only a garter belt, stockings, and high heels if it brings me back to you. If you want me in a certain way, tell me to bend over the nearest chair, regardless of who's watching. Spank my spine cheeks with a leather belt. Tell me when and where I'll bring the belt. No reason to trust me, but I'll put on a chastity belt and give you the keys as a condition for my return. Had blood drawn for an STD test, results in a couple of days. Tell me where to send them, and I'll get them to you. Jack, no matter what happens, you're the best person I've known. I know you'd never intentionally hurt me, even though I probably deserve it. I accept it all, not asking you to forget or trust me again. I'm asking for the opportunity to be yours in any capacity you desire. I ask for nothing more than to come back to you forever, even if I have to agree to a divorce or watch you with other women. I pray it doesn't happen, but I realize it's not my decision. I'm at fault, and I recognize you might want to even the goose. All that stuff. What about Mary, Larry, Josh, and the lawsuit against my company? Mary manipulated me into agreeing to this plan. Josh and Larry took advantage of that. As you know, I'll be fired once the lawsuit is settled. It's all our fault. Do what you want with them, I'll help if you want. After all, I'm your willing slave from now on. Your loving slave, Kayla. Update, fortunately, Jack hasn't blocked my email yet. Even more surprising is that he actually read it. No, he didn't take my word for it. After all, I'd already broken the biggest vow I'd ever made, the one about leaving everyone else behind. Since I'd broken that promise, what could make him think I wouldn't break any other promises? All I could do was prove it to him, one action at a time. 2 years had passed since I sent that letter. Josh and Larry faced challenges in their divorces, and all 4 of us were terminated the day after the lawsuit against the company was settled. Eventually, Josh and Larry found lower-paying jobs and moved into a small apartment in a rough neighborhood. Their social lives suffered, and their ex-wives turned the kids against them. I realized both women are now in better relationships. Now it's my turn. Currently, I'm kneeling undressed beside the bed, wearing a chastity belt while Jack finishes. This is my penance. I detailed all of this in a letter. Yes, Jack wanted to test me to see if I would honor those words. If I want him back, I don't have much choice. It was a tough 6 months, but eventually he eased up a bit. He still makes me do it sometimes, like now, but it's improved. Now, he only brings other women home once every 2 months. After getting fired, I stopped working. Jack got a promotion, and we managed just fine without my income. I stay home taking care of our 2-year-old twins. I'm undressed most of the time, though Jack recently said I need to start wearing clothes at home soon. The kids are getting old enough that it feels weird otherwise. Right now, I only wear clothes when leaving the house or when we have guests. I still answer the door undressed for deliveries. I underwent laser hair removal, so I have a permanent landing strip over my genitals. This makes it impossible to hide my Jack tattoo on the right side of the band and Jack tattoo on the left side. Every week, Jack updates the 5 red stripes on my buttocks with a leather strap. Right after the 5th stroke, he removes my plug and engages me back as I lean over the couch. I'm not perfect. Sometimes there are more stripes on my buttocks or chest when I mess up, but I genuinely enjoy it. Who knew the sting of a strap-on could cause a bond? Mary? Well, she's still married. True, she got fired as well, but no one anticipated her facing any significant consequences. Her husband seemed entirely submissive to her whims. She'd easily find another job, and life would continue for her. Life isn't always fair, right? Actually, it is. Harold wasn't the submissive loser everyone believed. Once he gathered evidence, he got furious. I thought I had a tough 6 months, but compared to hers, it was a walk in the park. Deciding he had punished her adequately, he served her with divorce papers. While putting Mary through hell, he quietly liquidated all their assets and safeguarded them. He gave her the house after refinancing it and taking all the equity, then vanished. She lost the house, and all the money disappeared. She found another job, but for half the salary she used to earn. She also has a tarnished reputation and is not dating presently, with another month of antibiotics ahead. You might be wondering why I endure this, or laughing at my deserved fate. If you're upset because Jack didn't leave me stranded, I thank God every day he didn't, though I deserved it. I endure it because I can't fathom being without the love of my life. Yes, Jack whips and humiliates me, but he still loves me. He has other women, but never without me. I can leave any time, and Jack showed me divorce papers where he'd be fair. I declined the offer. He's an excellent father, lover, and husband. I don't need anything else. I got so caught up in the idea of women's marriage that I lost sight of what truly matters. Instead of being content in an equal relationship, I became subservient to my husband. It wasn't intended, but—
Story 2.
My fiancé cheated with the wedding planner, leading me to call off the wedding and kick her out. Today was supposed to be my wedding day and the happiest day of my life, getting married to the love of my life, but see? Here I am on this thread, penning down my miserable life. I male was about to be married to Brianna female today. I had proposed to her a month ago and she was elated about it. We've been seeing each other for almost 2 years now, and I felt it was time for us to exchange vows. You see, I'm more of a boring and introverted nerd of sorts. If you asked me to plan an event, I would most likely put together the most basic stuff and get done with it. So, when she proposed to take charge, I happily handed over my credit card to her. That was my contribution to our wedding. Brianna wanted to hire a wedding planner for the big day. She was involved in every basic detail of the event. I wanted the wedding to be in a month, but she said it would take at least 3 months to pull off the kind of wedding she wanted. I agreed to have it her way. I met the planner once to seal the deal, and the next time I met them, my world crashed. Brianna shortlisted 2 wedding planners for me to meet and finalize one. We finalized Mara. She was damn good at her business, that was it. I knew the preparation was going on. I got busy at work trying to wrap up my work before the wedding. We had planned for a week-long honeymoon to Paris, so before that, I had to wind up my work. Brianna used to update me on the progress, and I was cool with that. The planning was going on fine. Then one day, Brianna told me that Mara met with an accident and fractured her knees. She was in a cast for the next 6 weeks. In her absence, her stepbrother would be stepping in to take care of her work. A few days after this, I asked Brianna if everything was going okay, and she said yes, Mara's brother was handling it well. 2 weeks before our wedding, the venue we had earlier decided on had to be canceled due to sudden rain predicted on those dates. It was an outdoor location, so we had to switch to something indoor. They shortlisted the banquet hall of a 5-star hotel. Brianna asked me to spare some time to visit the new venue and write a check to them. I took 2 hours off from work, picked up Brianna, and drove to the location. Mara was there with her brother. She had recovered from her injuries, but her brother was still handling the arrangements. The 4 of us were waiting for the manager in charge of the booking to arrive. A few minutes later, a middle-aged woman arrived. She introduced herself as the banquet hall manager and went straight to greet Brianna, saying, "You must be the bride. The glow on your face speaks for itself." Our friend was also saying that Brianna had been glowing ever since I proposed to her. While the wedding could be a reason, there were other factors too. Brianna turned pale on seeing that lady and was cutting her off in between. After hugging Brianna, that lady greeted Mara's brother and said, "You're a lucky man to have such a gorgeous woman as your fiancé. No wonder you're unable to take your hands off of her." Brianna grinned and intervened, saying, "There must have been some misunderstanding." The lady, trying to assure Brianna, said, "Oh, don't be embarrassed. You guys are so much in love and going to be married soon. I run this hotel. I see so many couples making out in the elevator every day, so no big deal for me." Mara sensed the discomfort in the situation and pitched in, but it was too late. She said, "Okay, we were here to discuss the final quotation for the venue." I stood up and left without saying a word. I couldn't sit there pretending nothing had happened. I understood what exactly had been going on there. Brianna ran behind me, trying to stop me. I closed the elevator on her face, rushed to the parking lot, and drove off. I could see her chasing my car in the basement. That 15-minute drive to work was the most difficult drive for me. My phone was constantly buzzing with her calls and voicemails. I reached the office but was really not in a condition to work. I requested the receptionist not to forward any calls or meetings for the day and canceled all the impending ones. After hundreds of missed calls from Brianna, I responded. It was all about, "That's not how it sounded, there's a misunderstanding." That lady admitted she might have mistaken me for someone else. "She wants to apologize to you. Could you please come and meet her once again?" I said, "I'm no fool here." She insisted that I meet the woman once again to clear the confusion. I hung up without saying anything. I didn't respond to her after that call. In the evening, I got a call from Mara. She said she was sorry to interfere in her personal matter, but she also requested me to meet that woman and see for myself what she had to say. I said, I don't know, I'm not in the right state of mind right now. After thinking a lot about it, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt and meet that woman. I didn't tell Mara or Brianna about it. The next day, I again went to the hotel and asked for that lady. I was escorted to her cabin, and she apologized to me. She said she might have seen someone else and mistakenly took it for Brianna. I was convinced by her reason. I mean, she could be confused by one person, but not both of them. She said, maybe I saw Brianna and that young man together during their site visit, and the next instance, I saw some other couple making out and got confused. I asked her if she could show me the camera footage of the elevator on the day Brianna visited the venue. She suddenly turned pale and stammered her way to say that she couldn't. It was beyond her company's policy to show the camera footage to outsiders. The security policy was understandable, but her behavior was still suspicious too. Me. I asked her why she was explaining herself and why she needed to be so apologetic. She said she was worried about getting fired from her job if Mara complained about her big-mouthed behavior to the hotel owner. I mean, the hotel lost its bookings due to her nosiness. I said, look, I don't believe your reason at all, but if you're worried about your job, I can assure you that it won't be affected. I called Mara right in front of that lady and told her I was canceling the booking for the venue and she wouldn't do anything to jeopardize that lady's job. Mara asked me if I had met that woman. I said yes, and she has cleared the confusion from her end, but I still want to call off the wedding, and it has nothing to do with the hotel manager. Mara said okay and hung up. That woman thanked me for it. While I was leaving, she asked for my card. I gave it to her. Later in the evening, I got a call from her, and she told me that she had actually seen Brianna with that wedding manager guy, and there was no confusion. She had agreed to lie to me to save her job. Brianna had begged her to lie and even softly threatened her that she would complain to management about her nosy behavior. I asked her why she was speaking the truth now. She said I was kind to her, and she wanted me to know the truth because she had a broken house due to a cheating husband. She understands the pain of betrayal. Fair enough. I didn't tell anyone about this. I'm not that social of a guy. My work keeps me busy. I have a close-knit bond with my siblings, but I didn't tell them or my mom either. Meanwhile, Brianna kept sending me cute texts and selfies. I'm yet to block her or even confront her about the truth, though I understood the truth on the very first meeting with this lady. Meeting her for the second time got me thinking about Brianna's cruelty. I mean, how could she stoop so low to threaten the woman for her job and force her to lie? Now I wonder if I really know the woman I was supposed to be getting married to today. Ah, the joys of wedding planning. They say it's the happiest day of your life. From will you marry me to will you lie for me in just a few dramatic scenes. Brianna, the blushing bride-to-be, turned master manipulator. Pulling strings like she's auditioning for the lead role in How to Lose a Groom in 10 Days. Well, you're sure to lose one when you're fooling around in an elevator with someone other than your fiancé. Edit 1. I didn't go home on D-Day. I spent the night at my office. The next day, I met the woman at the hotel, and things became crystal clear. That evening, I called Mara and asked her to come down to my office. When she was here, I told her I wanted to terminate the contract. I was ready to pay whatever was under their policy and some extra compensation for her loss, but she politely refused. She charged me whatever was within the contract. She even gave me an extra refund out of empathy, but I think it's her guilt because our life got screwed because of her low-life brother. She said she would initiate the exit formalities and mail me. It was sorted. Brianna was still texting me, asking me when I would come home and sending all those loving and caring messages. She flipped when Mara sent the contract termination email. Brianna panic-called me, asking me to come home and talk this out like adults. I responded that she needed to vacate my house and that there was nothing left to be talked about. She came down to my office, but I asked my reception desk to not let her inside my cabin and tell her I was busy. I called her and asked her to leave. I said I was not in a state to have any rational conversation with her and that she should not bother me for some time. She vacated the house with her essentials but left the car. It was gifted by me on her last birthday. I've been holding myself together until now, but today was supposed to be my wedding day. Calls from friends and relatives are making it worse. I've switched off my phone from the morning. Nothing says avoid confrontation like a cozy desk chair and the soothing hum of fluorescent lights. Who needs marital bliss when you've got ergonomic furniture, am I right? So, you met with the hotel manager and decided to cut ties with the wedding circus once and for all. Contract termination, extra refunds, and a side order of guilt sounds like the perfect recipe for bidding farewell to matrimonial mayhem. Update 1. I spent the next week living in a cocoon, limiting my conversation only to my senior staff for work-related stuff. I asked my wedding planner to do me a favor and send the cancellation email to all the guests who were invited. That led to a flood of calls and texts from pretty much everyone. My side of people were worried about me, while her family and friends were behind me for reconciliation. Brianna was still telling everyone that I had called off the wedding over some stupid misunderstanding. I let it be. After a week of sulking and brooding over my sorrows, I had to get back to work. I don't have the luxury of just moving out of the city and disappearing like others I read about on this subreddit. I wish I had that luxury. Now, I'm cursing myself for even trying to get into this love crap. Gladly, I've been away from all these for so long I should have stayed that way. My friends were right in saying I was late to the wedding bells, but it has to do with my family setup. My dad passed away when I was in my final year of college, leaving his manufacturing business to me. I have a sister and a younger brother. My sister was in her freshman year when Dad passed away, and my brother was still in high school. So, naturally, everything came to me. Our business wasn't on the multinational level that could operate with a board and trustees without the owner's presence. It's a mid-sized manufacturing business where someone needs to actually run the show to survive. I was quick to jump into the boat and take it over. We had no other option. We had a house mortgage and college education to fund for my siblings and support for my mom. She's not a working woman. I worked hard to learn the business and tried to scale it up. I was so worked up for all these years that my love life had been put on hold. I had a few things here and there, but nothing serious, not even casual relationships. Most of it was one-night stands and casual sex. I met Brianna 2 years back at a common friend's party. She was so bubbly and cheerful that I couldn't take my eyes off her. We started off as a casual fling and didn't realize when I fell for her. She deserves a lot of credit for putting up with my busy schedule. She had been patient and accommodating with my work commitments. That's when she said she wanted a wedding of her choice. I readily agreed. She deserved to have a dream wedding, and that's what I thought, until now. I haven't told a lot of people the reason for our wedding falling out. My mom and siblings know, and for the rest of the others, they don't need to know. Brianna showed up at my mom's house thinking she didn't know the truth. She requested my mom to help us reconcile. Out of respect, Mom didn't spill the truth and said she would ask me to call her. I didn't want to, but Mom convinced me to have closure. It's necessary to move on. All the hows, whys, and whens need to be answered. I'm not sure if I really need closure or if I've already moved on without it. I'll do it if I feel the need to have the answers. Edit 2. I have canceled the honeymoon bookings we had for Paris. It was insurance covered, so I got the refund pretty much, except for the flight booking. I canceled it at the last moment. Edit 3. People calling her a gold digger, please don't use that word. I don't want to put all sorts of labels on her just because she cheated. She cheated, and I called off the wedding. That's it. I don't want to be disrespectful toward her unnecessarily. Update 2. Brianna showed up at my door last day. I knew she eventually would. If this was earlier, I might have gotten a restraining order against her, but now I think my anger has subsided. The pain is still there, but I think now I was ready to at least listen to her. I let her in. She wanted to hug me, but I blocked her. Before she started speaking, I said, I know the truth, so better not to manipulate it. She went numb for some time and said, I'm here to confess, and went on to say the cheating was never intended, but it just happened. One thing led to another when Mara injured her knee. She was terrified about the whole arrangement and also kind of annoyed when her brother Aaron, the affair partner, took over her work. She got more involved to make everything seamless. For the first 2 or 3 times, she didn't even notice him that closely. Their conversation was very transactional. Only when they went for the wedding dress trial and the way he meticulously selected everything to match her taste and elegance did she notice him. He was just being extra nice and sweet to her. I'm sorry, I know I screwed up. I kind of fell for his flirtatious comments about my beauty and features. Unknowingly, I was seeking validation from him. It was so flattering I couldn't resist myself. She broke down, bawling her lungs out. I asked her when they crossed the line. She asked if I really wanted to know all the details. I said yes. She said, when we went to visit the hotel venue, Aaron picked me up. I was floored by his chivalry. In the car, he was trying to touch me, but I didn't reciprocate it. But we eventually made out in the elevator. That's when that woman saw us. Coincidentally, she saw us again when we were leaving the hotel. We were making out again. I asked her if it was just that. She stammered, no. Then we booked a room in the same hotel and had sex 2 or 3 times. It suffocated me so badly that I had to get up and take a walk to the front porch to gasp for air. Was that all? She said yes, and then the next day, that lady at the hotel spilled out the truth. Brianna was also choking from heavy breathing. I realized her guilt was giving her tough times. She looked pathetic. She kept crying and apologizing. I couldn't hold back my tears. She held my arms and asked if there was the slightest chance of getting back together. I said no. She let an affair partner sleep with her because he complimented her generously. It was such a cheap deal for her. I cannot trust someone so shallow. I mean, if her reason is that his flattering compliments lured her into his pants, then there could be so many areas where I falter and others are good at that. I'm busy at work. I'm not that romantic kind of person. I'm introverted and not very good at giving compliments. Does this mean every time she meets a guy who has these qualities, which I don't, she would cheat? She said I was indirectly calling her a whore. I said I'm not putting any label on her but speaking the facts. She had never cheated on me for all these years, and she had never found me incompetent. She said my love was just enough for her. I wish it was, but it's not. I don't want to live in a constant feeling of insecurity and incompetence that she might meet someone better and fuck everything up again. There were several rounds of breakdowns, crying and apologizing for hours. I realized it was not working. It was getting worse for both of us, especially me. I was getting weak and falling for her tears, so I showed my backbone and stood up to leave. I told her I had packed and kept her remaining stuff in the garage. She didn't say anything and kept sobbing. I came back after an hour and she was gone. I checked the garage. She had taken her stuff. I feel lighter now. Indeed, closure helped in my case. I didn't think I needed it, but I'm glad I listened to my mom and gave it a shot. The classic confession at the doorstep scenario. Nothing says welcome back like a tear-stained apology and a side of betrayal. Update, this is mostly going to be my last update. I might delete the account later. Updating here has helped me clear my head and move on. Thanks to everyone who made me feel I'm not alone in this. I've unblocked Brianna, but I've also made it clear that we are not going to be together. She understands that now and doesn't bother me. She also confessed the truth to her parents, who then called me to apologize. After I canceled the wedding, they were literally threatening to hunt me down. After knowing the truth, they were sorry about that. I said it was fine and understandable. I have no harsh feelings for them. Now that my anger has subsided, I feel maybe I too have a role to play in this cheating. I need to work on expressing my feelings and letting my loved ones know how much I love them. Communication has been my problem. I love my family and would give my legs and arms for them, but rarely have I told them that I love them. Same for Brianna. I loved her more than anything else, but I wasn't generous in expressing that feeling. She's the prettiest woman I have seen, yet I didn't tell her this enough. I'm not justifying her cheating at all, nor am I planning any reconciliation, but I feel this to be my incompetence. I've scheduled an appointment with a therapist, and I'm looking forward to working on this aspect of my personality. I don't wish for any serious relationship now, not at least in the near future. Heartbreak is hard. It's damn hard. Thanks for reading this and engaging with my post. Appreciate all the comments, good and bad. Oh, the bittersweet symphony of closure. It's like breaking up with your problems and making up with yourself. Kudos to you, OP, embarking on a journey of self-discovery. That's more cathartic than a therapy session with Dr. Phil. May your heartbreak be but a footnote in the grand epic of your life, and may your future be filled with love, laughter, and maybe a few fewer elevator make-out sessions. Cheers to moving on, moving forward, and moving up in the game of life. Thank you for joining us today.
Story 3.
My wife, Sherry, believed I was unaware of her plans, thinking I was either foolish or oblivious to her growing affair with her coworker Todd. She assumed I'd tolerate her actions and accept her continuing to be involved with him. However, she had another thing coming. She didn't realize I'd been suspicious for quite some time. I noticed changes, clear signs of infidelity, like working late frequently, upgrading her wardrobe, more aggressive closeness, and a loss of interest in our shared interests. Despite my attempts to discuss my concerns, she consistently ignored them. Sherry, naturally, denied anything was wrong, attributing it to my insecurities and possessiveness working overtime. I had no choice but to hire a private investigator. I refused to remain blind to the truth. I'd made it clear from the beginning of our relationship, and reiterated it over our 10-year marriage, that I would never tolerate my wife cheating on me. So it was with mixed feelings that I sat in private investigator Jake Sloan's office and listened to his report. I felt relieved when he made it clear that Sherry hadn't cheated. However, That relief was short-lived when he added the term, "for now." As he explained, my wife was having an affair. It just hadn't escalated to something intimate, but it was only a matter of time. Apparently, Sherry and Todd referred to themselves as working spouses. I detested that term. Sherry had only one spouse, me. Some might find that expression cute and harmless, but to me, it meant she was having an intimate relationship with someone else. Well, as it turns out, that's exactly what she was having. According to the private investigator's report, Sherry and Todd had lunch together daily, just the two of them. They held hands and sat next to each other. He provided numerous photos of them hugging, sometimes even kissing. I was infuriated by what I saw and wanted to strangle that smug idiot Todd. In addition to lunches, the lovers often worked late together, even though there was no good reason for it. It was as if they wanted to avoid going home to their respective spouses and siphon as much of our time out of each day as possible. The detective told me that he was able to trace Sherry's emails and messages. I knew this was completely illegal and I could never use it in a divorce. In our state, divorce for infidelity was possible but difficult. No-fault divorces were much easier, and I didn't need evidence for that anyway. I just wanted it for my own purposes. Sloan refused to give me copies of the actual messages. He wouldn't even let me see them. Instead, he offered me a summary of what they contained. He assured me that my wife had never spoken disparagingly of me. Several times Todd tried to disparage me, but Sherry wouldn't let him. Well, I guess it could have been worse. Emails and texts confirmed their romantic relationship. Although neither of them professed love, their conversations were very intimate, bordering on texting. Todd sent my wife pictures of his buddy, which she took delight in reciprocating with shots of her bare chest. As far as Sloan could tell, she hadn't sent any explicit pictures yet. As I sat in his office pondering my next steps, Sloan gave me the worst news of all. Todd's wife was going out of town for 3 days to visit her mother. The lovers decided to take the opportunity to meet up and consummate their relationship. The only thing standing in their way was me. They were uncertain about how they could spend the night together if I remained in the vicinity. Since I had no intention of leaving town, making it nearly impossible, they contemplated various plans. One idea was to inform me that Sherry was going on a girls-only weekend trip, fearing I might discover the truth by talking to her friends. However, she didn't want to involve anyone to create a believable cover story, leading to the abandonment of that idea. Another option they considered was compelling me to leave town, but I dismissively remembered Sherry suggesting I organize a golf trip with my buddies, an option I rejected. Ultimately, they opted for a new but direct approach: honesty. Todd believed I was on the path to becoming a betrayed man and that I would do anything to keep Sherry as my loving, happy wife, even allowing her to have an affair. Somehow, he convinced Sherry that by sleeping with him, she would enhance our lovemaking life and relationship. He persuaded her that all she needed to do was disclose her plans with Todd to me, and I would reluctantly agree to let her proceed. Clearly, Todd underestimated my resolve, but what surprised me the most was that Sherry bought into his deceptive narrative. It should have been evident to her that I wouldn't tolerate this, and if she failed to realize that, then she might be mentally unstable. Sloan informed me that this was all the information they had, so I accepted what he provided and went home. I requested him to continue monitoring Sherry's messages and update me if anything changed. On Friday, Sloan called me and informed me that Sherry planned to meet me the following Monday after work. She intended to disclose that she would go on a date with Todd on Friday night, starting with dinner and dancing and culminating with the couple spending the night in a hotel room. She would thoughtfully return to my house on Saturday or maybe Sunday, depending on their activities. Sherry and Todd rehearsed her entire speech, convincing themselves that I would acquiesce to her demands. They anticipated my initial upset and anger, but Sherry planned to assure me that it was a one-time thing, despite both knowing otherwise. She even suggested having lovemaking with me afterward as a reward for my understanding, assuming I would be pleased to have Todd's sloppy seconds and comply with her wishes. How considerate of them to think of my needs. With only 2 days to prepare for the confrontation, Sherry and Todd jokingly referred to it as an intervention. However, I was determined to turn their intervention into my stand. Over the weekend, I contemplated various scenarios, pondering whether I wanted to salvage my marriage. My plan of action evolved organically as I considered my feelings for Sherry. I decided to confront the issue directly and end it for good. Initially blissfully happy when we first got married, Sherry and I spent all our time together, sharing everything we had experienced in life. She was my best friend and my best lover, but somehow it all seemed to disappear. Perhaps that's just the way things work. Nothing lasts forever. Maybe my view of marriage was old-fashioned and idealized, envisioning us as a team facing life's trials and tribulations together. Having experienced unsuccessful marriages before, Sherry and I questioned whether the problem lay with us or the institution of marriage itself. How can people expect to maintain feelings, desires, interests, and passions when fate insists on being fickle and changing everything and everyone? In a world of fast-paced culture, social media, and instant gratification, perhaps marriage, like dinosaurs and CDs, is obsolete. Briefly considering the idea of letting Sherry be with Todd, I quickly dismissed it, refusing to let him claim rights to my wife. I was ready for a fight when my wife called me just after lunch on Monday. "Hey, Sherry," I said, noting her recent lack of calls during my work hours. I expressed my concern about it and hoped everything was okay. She greeted me with a "Hi, honey," which made me wonder if she used the same endearment with Todd. Despite the thought, I brushed it off and inquired about her being home on time tonight, as she had something important to discuss. Responding positively, I mentioned having important news as well, and confirmed my availability around 5:15. However, she didn't respond immediately, and I sensed her motive for asking. When she asked about the nature of my big news, I decided to keep it for our later face-to-face conversation. I excused myself, citing the urgency of my monthly report, and hung up. I then informed my boss about taking the rest of the day off, and he didn't mind. Sitting at the kitchen table later, I anxiously awaited her arrival. The garage door opened at 5:27, and despite my high emotions, I maintained a calm exterior. I had an open bottle of Sauvignon Blanc on ice and 2 glasses ready. She entered alone, tossing her keys and purse on the table, and I felt relieved she hadn't brought Todd along, which would have complicated things. I welcomed her with a smile. "Hi, sweetheart," I greeted her warmly, using the affectionate term she had employed earlier. I welcomed her home and asked whether she needed some time before our conversation or if she preferred to dive right in. My immediate desire to talk took her by surprise, and I could tell she wasn't prepared for it so soon. My goal was to keep her in suspense and maintain the upper hand. Acknowledging her surprise at my readiness to talk, Sherry admitted she hadn't expected me to wait. Nevertheless, she agreed that starting our conversation sooner would be better and joined me at the table. I proposed the idea of sharing my news first and inquired if she had any objections. Hesitantly, she responded, indicating that it was okay and expressing a slight uncertainty. Without waiting for her response, I poured us both a glass of wine. She accepted it gratefully, drinking half before I refilled her glass. Starting to discuss my thoughts on the matter, I conveyed that I had been reflecting on it a lot. I made it clear that I wouldn't beat around the bush and saw no point in dragging it out. Pausing deliberately to create tension, I observed Sherry stepping forward, her gaze fixed on me. Curious, she asked, "What's the matter?" I conveyed my desire for a divorce, stating it bluntly and allowing a few moments for Sherry to grasp the message. Initially, confusion clouded her face, as if the words weren't registering. Eventually, understanding dawned, and she reacted with shock. Fear and anxiety briefly flickered across her expression, quickly replaced by surprise, perhaps stemming from concerns about her affair with Todd being exposed. In response to her query about the reason, I disclosed that my feelings had changed, expressing, "I don't love you anymore." My words appeared to affect Sherry deeply. Struggling to comprehend my statement, she questioned, "You what?" "I've fallen out of love with you, Sherry," I declared, sharing the fabricated detail that I couldn't recall the exact moment. In truth, I was well aware it had been a long time, but I had avoided confronting the reality. Perplexed, she asked, "What are you talking about?" Her expression hinted at an impending emotional breakdown, catching me off guard. In an attempt to illustrate my perspective, I prompted her to recall the early days of our marriage. Reminiscing about our shared activities and routines, I highlighted the close bond we once had. Sherry nodded in agreement as I continued, mentioning our joint lunches, the anticipation of returning home to each other, and shared hobbies, including the pottery classes she had persuaded me to join. Her intense gaze indicated she was captivated by the memories. It wasn't about the pottery. It was about sharing the experience with her. She expressed that she loved every minute of it, watching me and assisting me. She admired my enthusiasm. Similarly, painting the Christmas Village buildings became a shared activity we enjoyed. We purchased a dozen unpainted houses, creating a display for Christmas. It was a tedious task, but we found pleasure in it. Sherry admitted that mine were always better than hers. Recalling the night spent at the table applying paint to the shingles, Sherry nodded in agreement. Back then, I loved her deeply. We also dedicated hours to painting large posters she had acquired during a trip to Myrtle Beach, long before adult coloring books became popular. Although we still had hundreds of coloring pens, they, like our love, had all dried up. When Sherry defensively asserted that her love hadn't dried up, I chose to ignore her and continued. Our friends often expressed jealousy over our relationship. We did everything together, taking long walks daily while holding hands. If I needed to run errands, such as going to the hardware store for grass trimmer line, she would accompany me. Similarly, if she wanted to shop for clothes, I would patiently wait outside the dressing room. Sherry challenged me, noting that I didn't enjoy accompanying her during shopping trips. I explained that I was often on my phone, not particularly interested in the clothes, but rather there to be with her. I emphasized that I didn't mind what she chose, finding her beautiful in everything. I mentioned that I could have stayed home watching sports, but chose to be with her instead. We discussed how other women in the neighborhood gathered for activities like bingo or bachelorette parties, but Sherry never showed interest. Recalling her reason for not participating, I acknowledged her previous comment about preferring to hang out with me than with the chickens. Reflecting on our shared moments, we remembered cuddling under the covers on many nights, watching a favorite movie. Sherry, wiping a tear away, expressed her love for the film. I mentioned that we must have watched it at least 100 times, and expressed a desire to continue watching it together. In response to my mention of divorce, Sherry exclaimed her reluctance to end the marriage. She envisioned growing old together, taking cooking and ballroom dancing lessons, or simply lying in bed and reading books. Expressing the growing estrangement between us, I admitted uncertainty about when it began, looking intently into her eyes. We transitioned from dining out 2 or 3 days a week to a weekly occurrence, a change largely influenced by Sherry. She claimed a lack of time for lunch outside the office, which turned out to be untrue. She continued eating out, but with someone else. Eventually, we ceased having lunch together entirely, and I started joining my coworkers. I gradually found enjoyment in their company, perhaps even too much. In the conversation, I exaggerated the situation, making an effort not to place blame solely on Sherry. I wanted to avoid triggering defensiveness or turning the discussion into a scolding. That wasn't my goal, at least not yet. Our habit of coming home early to spend time together lost its significance. We began working later and later, and when we finally did return home, we often felt distant or distracted. Responding to Sherry's question about why I never talked about it, I acknowledged that she was right. Despite having expressed these concerns many times before, I agreed with her, expressing a wish to understand why spending time together hadn't been important for her. I admitted feeling a sense of failure in that regard. I felt like I was taking responsibility for our estrangement. That was far from the truth. I knew that if I hit Sherry with Todd first, we couldn't end the discussion without it getting nasty. I would never make her see my side of things. I'd be the controlling, jealous idiot before I revealed what I knew. I wanted her to remember what we had and think about her role in destroying it. Gradually, we stopped doing almost everything together. You started going to your bachelorette parties, I started going to poker nights, you'd go to spas on the weekends, I'd go golfing. Sherry and I began to spend entire days without discussing anything beyond the weather or the latest news. Our lovemaking life also suffered, with fatigue or lack of interest often hindering our closeness. Reflecting on our early days of marriage, I pointed out how we couldn't get enough of each other. We used to engage in intimate activities 4 or 5 days a week, sometimes multiple times a day. I mentioned playfully fondling her while she cooked, skipping dinner to spend the night together. Activities like going to the hot tub, which used to be a regular part of our routine, had become non-existent for over a year. When Sherry suggested that I didn't want lovemaking anymore, I refuted the idea, finding it baseless. I believed she might be trying to shift blame onto me to justify her own behavior. In response, I laughed and clarified, "Oh God, no, I never stopped wanting lovemaking. I'm just as eager now as I was 10 years ago. I simply stopped wanting lovemaking with you." I knew that would hurt deeply. She thought she had rejected me physically, and here I was telling her that our lack of lovemaking was because I didn't want her. I almost would have laughed if I hadn't been so hurt. Sherry, taken aback, asked what I meant when I mentioned she didn't want to have lovemaking with me. I casually mentioned losing interest and described how, from my perspective, she seemed unresponsive and disinterested in anything exciting or remotely naughty. I suggested that it appeared as though she wanted to finish quickly and move on to more interesting activities like knitting. Expressing my desire for weekend lovemaking marathons, I emphasized that she didn't even want me to give her an incredible pleasure. I labeled our physical encounters as boring and claimed that I had faked enjoyment in the last few instances just to get it over with. When Sherry objected, claiming that I came inside her, I reminded her that she insisted on using contraceptives, despite being on birth control. I explained that she never paid attention to the contraceptives, making it easy for me to fake it by humming, rolling off, and disposing of the empty contraceptive. Her reaction was one of shock and embarrassment, and I admitted that my plan had worked. Apologizing, I added insult to injury by suggesting, "It was me, not you." She stared at me for a moment, her face flushed, tears dried. I wasn't sure if her expression reflected anger, frustration, or embarrassment. In an attempt to ease the tension, I refilled her empty glass, and she took a big sip. Continuing, I explained that it was only a matter of time before we started seeking companionship elsewhere. I clarified that when I said someone else, I didn't mean myself, though she wasn't aware of that distinction. Suddenly, Sherry asked angrily if I was cheating on her or in love with someone else. In response, I reassured her of my commitment to our marriage and emphasized my aversion to infidelity. I acknowledged our shared history of being betrayed by our previous spouses, expressing my dedication to not repeating those mistakes. Sherry apologized, recognizing the unfair accusation and agreeing that she knew I wouldn't engage in such behavior. However, she looked guilty and couldn't meet my gaze, her hands trembling. Transitioning to the topic of our intimate relationship, I suggested waiting until after the divorce to be together for the first time, hinting at a new love interest. I then revealed my big news, stating that I had met with my lawyer and finalized the paperwork. I informed her that she would be served with divorce papers on Friday. In response to her desperate inquiry, I reiterated that she would indeed be served on Friday, attempting to conceal a smile. I explained that it was for the best, allowing both of us to regain our freedom and acknowledge that the last 10 years had been a waste of our time. I expressed that the past years weren't a waste of time for me, and suggested to Sherry that she likely desired the divorce as much as I did. I mentioned that it seemed she hadn't wanted to be with me for a long time, labeling our wedding as a mistake. Sherry objected, expressing her unwillingness to get a divorce. She insisted that she loved me and wanted to be married forever. Regrettably, I responded that I no longer loved her, citing the no-fault divorce state we were in. I explained that splitting assets equally was the norm, and we could avoid a messy legal process unless one of us cheated and infidelity could be proven, which was unlikely in our case. I proposed dividing our money equally, planning to visit the bank the next day. I mentioned the need to open new accounts, get new credit cards, change utility bills, and sell the house, with a realtor scheduled to put it on the market on Wednesday. Sherry, feeling overwhelmed, objected, expressing uncertainty and asking me to stop. She cried again as I assured her that I had already packed my things and would be staying in a hotel until a permanent move. I suggested she stay in the house until it was sold. Sherry shouted for me to wait, but I insisted there was no need, emphasizing the urgency to handle everything before Friday. Confused, she demanded to know the significance of that particular day. I casually mentioned that Friday was the day she had planned a date with Todd, her boyfriend. I suggested it was the day they intended to spend the night in a hotel together for a passionate evening. Sherry froze, her eyes wide and mouth agape. As she attempted to respond, I pulled out a folder containing a summary report from a private investigator. I showed her the section detailing her plans with Todd on Friday night. Interrupting her, I pointed out that the report confirmed their reservations at the Gaylord Texas for that night. When she started to explain, I cut her off, mockingly suggesting she might claim, "It's not what it looks like." I reminded her of the pictures capturing her and Todd kissing at lunch. Staring at me, tears streaming down her face, Sherry apologized quietly. With a wide smile on my face, I declared, "Now I remember exactly when I stopped loving you." I revealed that it was the day I discovered her plans to involve me in a betrayed man scenario, mirroring the betrayal from my ex-wife. She blurted out an apology, desperately trying to convince me that she didn't love Todd. According to her, the rendezvous with him was just a fling to rekindle our relationship. She assured me that after spending the night with Todd, we would spend the rest of the weekend having passionate lovemaking. She claimed Todd said it would turn me on and revitalize our sensuality. I countered, expressing my skepticism about revitalizing our lovemaking life by being with someone else instead of having it with me. I questioned the logic behind her actions. She attempted to change tactics, mentioning that Todd said I would be okay with it if it made her happy. I reiterated that I wanted her to be happy with me as we used to be, not with another man. I couldn't fathom how she thought I would be okay with such a proposition, given my clear stance against infidelity. She tried to justify her actions by claiming it wouldn't be infidelity since she would have my permission. Firmly, I stated that it would never happen, realizing that I should have understood that from the beginning. I expressed my disbelief at how I could have allowed boredom and loneliness to lead me down this path. I admitted that Todd had sparked my interest again. In response to her questioning how I could be bored and lonely when we were happily in love, I acknowledged that I didn't know. She continued, suggesting that I might have felt that way because I cut us off, stopped having lunch with her, and avoided spending time together. She accused me of choosing to put myself in that position and spending time with Todd instead of her, creating a situation where both Todd and I were bored and lonely. She denied the accusation, insisting that she couldn't believe she would have intentionally distanced herself. She recounted how I had told her I was too busy for lunch, and on one occasion, I had even texted her to go without me. She believed it was my decision for us to stop having lunch, and I never mentioned it, which she thought indicated I didn't realize the change. Sherry expressed that I had been so absorbed in my world with Todd that I didn't notice I was losing her. She declared that she didn't want Todd. She wanted me and us to be the way we used to be. Apologizing, she admitted to screwing up and giving up on us. I insisted it was too late, shaking my head in disagreement. Sherry pleaded, promising to quit her job, work elsewhere, and never see Todd again. She professed her love for me and claimed she hadn't cheated because they didn't have lovemaking. She acknowledged her foolishness, stating that Todd meant nothing to her and begging me not to leave. I maintained that it wasn't that simple, disagreeing when she said I stopped her before she went too far. I argued that just lovemaking would have sealed the deal. Sherry protested, saying they were just friends, and I countered, emphasizing that she should have been friends with me more than anyone else. Overwhelmed, Sherry dropped her head in her arms, sobbing, and vowed never to neglect me or take me for granted again. Sherry pleaded with me, asking if we could treat the situation as a big mistake and begging for forgiveness. I responded, stating that it wasn't just a mistake but a betrayal of our love. She insisted that her heart had always been mine, and I was the one who was willing to give my body to another man. I reminded her that she stopped me and questioned if my love for her was so insignificant that I couldn't fight for it. Expressing that she meant everything to me and that I'd fight for her, Sherry claimed she would die for me. I harshly declared my lack of affection, causing her to scream and attempt to pull me towards her. Despite her apologies and pleas, I asserted that while I believed she was sorry, it didn't change the fact that I no longer loved her. I assured her that she had Todd for comfort. Upon her revelation that Todd was married and only interested in a physical relationship, I grinned and suggested that his wife might have something to say about that. I informed her that both Todd's wife and I had used the same divorce attorney, handing her a folder containing the investigator's report, pictures of her with Todd, and details of the divorce proposal. I advised her to read the entire document. Sherry pleaded with me not to take such actions, suggesting that if I wanted to accompany her to the bank, I should call and let her know. I got up from the table and walked out of the house, ignoring the sound of my wife crying. Update. Sherry grappled with the divorce, and to avoid a prolonged and expensive legal battle, I agreed when the judge recommended marriage counseling. The counseling surpassed my expectations, fostering open and judgment-free communication between Sherry and me. She gained insight into why Todd's advances nearly jeopardized our marriage, and I conveyed the pain and humiliation she had caused. The counselor took pride in our progress. After a few sessions, I returned home, and we shared several passionate moments. Sherry willingly embraced my desires erotically. A year later, we had rekindled the loving connection we shared at the onset of our marriage. Sherry switched jobs and joined my company. We commuted together, had lunch daily, not out of obligation but genuine desire. In fact, we did nearly everything together. We adorned a small Christmas tree, completed abandoned paintings, took up another ceramics class, and enrolled in ballroom dancing. To my surprise, a box of colored pens I found wasn't dry. One night while cuddling under a blanket and watching You've Got Mail, Sherry kissed me and conveyed the need to discuss something important. Tears welled in her eyes, causing a moment of panic as my heart skipped a beat. Without giving me a chance to respond, Sherry revealed, "You're going to be a daddy." I smiled, wiped away her tears, and in a playful manner mimicked Tom Hanks saying, "Don't cry, Sellers." So I'm just obsessed with happy endings.
Story 4.
I remember when life felt simple, almost predictable. The mornings were a blend of rushing around, making breakfast for the kids, and exchanging tired smiles with Susan before heading off to our respective jobs. We would share hurried kisses that were more habitual than passionate, but at the time, that comfort felt enough. Weekends were our reprieve, park outings with Callum and Jesse, or cozy movie nights that ended with us collapsing onto the couch. It was a rhythm we had established over years, so seamlessly that I hardly noticed how complacency had started to seep in. But underneath that surface contentment, there were cracks. Subtle ones that I brushed off, an exhausted sigh from Susan when she thought I wasn't listening, a shared glance that felt just a bit distant. I chalked it up to stress, maybe even routine fatigue, convincing myself it was nothing more than a rough patch. Yet deep down, there was an ache, an inkling that our stable world wasn't as solid as I had believed. I couldn't shake the feeling that change was looming, waiting for just the right moment to upend everything I thought I knew. We seemed like an ordinary suburban couple, balancing satisfying careers with the joys of family life. In our mid-30s, we were content after 15 years of marriage, raising our 2 children, Callum and Jesse. We were known as Paul and Susan. I stood just under 6 feet tall, with a build that had softened from my once athletic form, though my chest remained broad, and I like to think I carried the extra weight well, or at least I hoped so. Susan, a slender redhead, stood 5 feet 5 inches without heels, with an impressive 34C2836 figure that I still admired. I had kept the same group of friends since school, and we continued to meet on weekends, though our activities had become tamer since marriage. While we still enjoyed sports, our gatherings shifted to couple-oriented social evenings and regular outings. Susan often spent time with her best friend Claire and her mother Anna. Claire, who had been Susan's bridesmaid, was a beloved aunt to our children, despite not being related. We grew even closer to her after her divorce from the unfaithful man who betrayed her. She was amazing, full of energy, and deserved better. When Susan and Claire went out, I would stay home with the kids, something I genuinely loved. I played the silly parent, making sure the kids had fun, while Susan played the stricter role, which worked well for us. Susan's behavior had changed recently, and while I carefully tried to ask about it, I couldn't figure out why. Sometimes she felt anxious about money, wishing for a bigger house and lavish vacations. My focus was more on the kids and social life, and I picked up extra shifts to help fund these plans. Susan started pulling away from our friends, spending more time with her mom. Eventually, she admitted she was worried about her. Anna had become a widow 18 months earlier after her husband's passing, and despite our support, she struggled to move forward. Susan devoted herself to caring for Anna, inviting her over for dinner and sharing wine. Although Anna loved spending time with us, she declined invitations to other social gatherings. Over time, I wondered if Susan was creating opportunities for me to spend time with her mom. I didn't mind. We got along extremely well, and I enjoyed her company. At 53, Anna looked much younger and was often mistaken for Susan's sister. I would tell her often that many men would be eager to take her out, which seemed to lift her spirits. Our time together became more frequent, and I thought maybe Susan was helping Anna ease back into talking to men as a prelude to more socializing. It was with this thought in mind that I found myself in one of the most unusual conversations of my life, sitting on the couch watching TV. "Paul, I'm really worried about Mom. She's been struggling so much since George passed. Losing the love of her life has left her unsure of how to move forward. We're doing our best to support her. You've been amazing, and I don't know what more we can do. You really have been great with her. Did I mention she said you remind her of George when he was younger? After my useless dad left with his girlfriend, it took George a long time to convince Mom to give him a chance. He was so patient and understanding. She just needs time to meet someone like George again. Susan fell silent for what felt like ages. I wondered if she had started to drift off to sleep. I think you should take her out. I laughed, surprised by the sudden suggestion, thinking it was a joke. But Susan didn't laugh. You're not serious, are you? I am serious. I know it sounds strange, but she needs help getting past that hurdle, and we're the only ones who can help her. Specifically you, since you're a man. Thanks for noticing, but I'm also her son-in-law. That's not really appropriate. Why not try matchmaking with someone her own age? She's completely refused to even talk to another man. You're the only one she trusts. So, like a friendly outing? Just to get her used to going out again. I could do that, I guess. Yes, like a date, mainly. But if it goes further than that, I'd be okay with it. What do you mean? She needs to feel wanted, to believe she's still attractive to men. I could do a little flirting. She must know men find her attractive. Honestly, I don't think she does. Her confidence is gone, and she's forgotten what it feels like. She thinks every guy is trying to take advantage of her. She needs to realize she can be with another man. Good grief. It sounds like you're asking me to sleep with her. Susan shrugged. You can't be serious. She's your mom. Don't tell me you're not attracted to her. I've seen how you look at her, and you two get along great. All I'm saying is that I'd be okay with whatever happens. And I suppose you wouldn't mind me being unfaithful to you? It's not cheating if I suggested it and know about it. I see it as an act of love. It's safe because I know you both love me and will come back to me. And does your mom know about this wild plan? She'll be furious when you tell her. We've already discussed it. A lot, actually. I think she's warming up to the idea. This is just crazy, Susan. I know it sounds weird, but please think about it. Don't dismiss it outright. Before I could process it all, Susan was on top of me, kissing me with urgency and pulling me into her. We discussed it at length, and Susan remained steadfast in saying she was comfortable with whatever happened. My initial resistance to the idea slowly began to fade. I had to admit to myself that I found Anna attractive. She was still stunning. With her long auburn hair, deep brown eyes, and curvy figure, she was a beautiful woman with a wonderful personality. Helping her wouldn't be a burden at all. In fact, it would be quite the opposite. Although I was married, my wife was the one who suggested it. The idea of spending time with an attractive woman for a good reason, with my wife's consent, seemed almost too perfect to be true. I eventually agreed to meet Anna for a drink in a neutral setting without Susan around to talk things over. We made small talk and got our drinks before I gathered the courage to address the main topic. Anna, Susan mentioned that she was okay if we wanted to go out more. How do you feel about it? It does feel a bit strange, but we've always gotten along so well, so maybe it could work. To be honest, Paul, I need something to change. I'm really lonely, but trusting a man is hard for me after my first husband treated me so poorly. She looked like she was about to cry, so I moved closer and hugged her. The scent of her perfume and the warmth of her body caught me off guard. It was genuinely lovely. Not wanting to dig deeper into her pain, I tried to lighten the mood. Well, I'm more than happy to spend time with you, and I guess we could call this a first date. It's not so bad, right? Anna's frown turned into a warm smile. Thank you, Paul. It's not bad at all. I already feel better. We shared a meal and chatted easily, making it comfortable enough for me to ask more questions. I asked her about her life and her relationship with George, and Anna was as open and engaging as always. If we continue with this, is there anything specific you'd like from it, Anna? It's been so long since I dated. Almost 30 years. I'm not even sure I remember how. You can, trust me. You're great company. You just need to be yourself. You're very attractive and deserve to start living again, not just getting by. And anyway, you seem to be doing just fine tonight. That's very kind of you, and I feel comfortable tonight because I'm with you. We're friends, and you're easy to talk to. Well, if you'd like, we can keep going out and see if it helps build your confidence. It shouldn't be too hard. You're a beautiful woman, Anna, and soon enough you'll be turning away admirers left and right. We shared a few meals together, each one relaxed and full of fun. I drove Anna home, and after turning off the engine, I was about to say goodnight when she leaned over and kissed me on the lips. I was taken aback. While it felt awkward, it also sent a jolt through me like lightning. I'm sorry, Paul. I've been wanting to do that for a while. I just couldn't hold back any longer. Don't apologize, I said, leaning in to kiss her properly. It was a long, passionate kiss. When we finally pulled back, I said, Wow, That was quite the kiss. Are you sure you want to keep going with this, Anna? She nodded. Yes, it feels right. And good. And you are open to taking things further? Are you asking about being intimate, Paul? I swallowed, trying to keep eye contact. I guess I am. I'd like us to be intimate. I've talked it over with Susan, and she fully supports it. It was even her idea. A surge of excitement went through me. Not just because Anna was attractive, but her candid, straightforward nature stirred something in me. Clearly, I was the one catching up between the three of us. Would you like that, Paul? Would you want to be with me? I can't deny it, Anna, but I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do. It feels right to me. I don't trust many men, Paul, but I'm a woman who still desires intimacy, and I'm very drawn to you. I'm sure we'd enjoy it. I couldn't help but notice her chest rise and fall as she breathed deeply, which only heightened my awareness. Anna smiled. Look as much as you like, Paul. Everything I have is yours if you want it. I was speechless, overwhelmed by desire and struggling with temptation. My attention shifted when Anna took my hand in hers. What about you, Paul? If this is a one-time thing, is there something you'd want from it? Maybe a fantasy Susan hasn't fulfilled? An image came to mind before I could stop it, making me stammer. No, nothing like that. Anna's smile was warm and reassuring. I know you're not being entirely honest. I promise I won't share it with anyone. Please, tell me your fantasy. I really shouldn't. There is one thing, but it's awkward to bring up. You might think it's disrespectful to George. Is it the idea of the widow in black? My eyes widened in surprise. Oh my, it is. Tell me more. Okay, I'll admit that idea has crossed my mind. Have you seen Monica Bellucci, Inspector? You remind me of her a little. I'm sorry, it's just a silly fantasy. I wish I looked like her, but thank you for the compliment. So you're into the whole black lingerie, seamed stockings, and heels look? I'm sorry, it was silly to mention. No need to apologize. Let me share a little secret. George used to buy me lingerie, and I loved dressing up for him. I have plenty of it, along with various outfits. I'd love to bring your fantasy to life. My mind was racing. Wow, really? That would be incredible. Well, if we're going to do this, we should do it right. I already have everything I need, and you'd be helping take care of a widow's needs. If I'm wearing that, I want you in a sharp suit and to have dinner at a fancy restaurant. How about Friday? I was still in a daze as we said goodbye with another lingering kiss. Sitting in my car, I tried to wrap my head around what just happened, mainly reminding myself that Anna was eager for this to happen and anticipating how Susan might react. When I got home, I expected Susan to be upset as I summarized our conversation, though I did leave out the detail about the widow fantasy. To my surprise, she was very calm, partly because Anna had already called her, and she knew we had set up the date. Susan was completely okay with it. I lost track of how many times I offered to cancel, but she was insistent that I shouldn't. This was exactly what her mom needed. She even helped me get my suit ready and iron my dress shirt, making the whole situation feel surreal. She kissed me as I was leaving and shocked me when she said she'd see me the next day. This was not just a date, but an overnight stay. Wow. I waited in the upscale restaurant, feeling a bit self-conscious in my suit and with nerves making my stomach churn. I'd be lucky to keep any of the pricey food down at this point. Then I saw her, and I was stunned. She spoke to the maitre d', who seemed quite taken with her. I watched her profile as she moved, noticing her curves and the subtle seam in her black stockings as she walked toward me. She was the embodiment of my fantasy. A tailored black jacket hugged her frame over a white satin blouse that struggled to contain her curves, the fabric pulled taut and buttons straining. A fitted pencil skirt outlined her thighs, and her stiletto heels clicked against the marble floor as she approached. As she got closer, I noticed she was wearing more makeup than usual, including bold red lipstick and matching red nails. Her hair was pinned up, highlighting her height and elegance. I quickly shut my mouth to avoid looking like I was about to drool. She smiled at me. I take it this meets your approval, Paul. Or should I say James Bond? Let's stick with Paul. I'd rather not have any villains interrupting us. And yes, you look absolutely stunning. I hope you feel comfortable in it. I'm not exactly comfortable, but I do feel good in it. It's exciting to dress up for what you desire most. I left the fascinator and net veil in the car. It felt a bit excessive for the restaurant. I'm flattered. We had another wonderful night, enjoying dinner, drinks, and dancing before heading back to her house. Once we arrived, she put on the fascinator and veil as she got out of the car. Now she embodied the classic widow look, fulfilling my dream. I was speechless as she led me directly upstairs to her bedroom. Are you sure you want it? Do what? Yes, that's exactly what I want, Paul. I want to make your fantasy a reality and finish with a memorable time together. Hearing Anna speak so directly was surprising and added to the intensity. She guided me to sit on the bed and began to undress slowly. She removed her jacket, then unbuttoned her blouse, revealing a basque that accentuated her figure. She then slid her skirt down, showcasing her stockings, garters, and lace underwear. Leave the rest on, including the veil and heels. Of course, anything for you. Anna gracefully moved between my legs, and the eye contact, combined with the red lipstick beneath the veil, was captivating. She clearly knew how to make the moment unforgettable. Anna would pause briefly, then continue, her focus and technique building the anticipation. Before long, I felt myself getting close. After a few more intense moments, I pulled back, and Anna looked up as I reached the peak. The first touch grazed her face and brushed against the net veil. The next followed, gently tracing her nose and eye. She parted her lips, and the remainder settled there and on her chest. As she drew herself closer, she cleaned me thoroughly, the sensation almost overwhelming. Well, you really are full of surprises. That was incredible. Are you sure Susan isn't going to be furious with me? Anna laughed, a warm, deep sound. If she is, she'll have to answer to me. This was mostly her idea. I wouldn't have dared suggest it on my own, but she believed it could help me. And she might be right. I haven't felt this alive in a long time. Then we should make the most of this opportunity. Already ready to go again? Absolutely. You've had me on edge since you walked into the restaurant. Good, because I'm up for it if you are. We can go all night. I love this time with you and am yours in any way you want. Anna stood up, turned around, and adjusted her attire before leaning forward over the bed. Why don't you fill me up with that amazing body of yours? Don't worry. I'm going to give you exactly what you deserve. I positioned myself at her entrance, slowly pressing forward and feeling the heat as I entered. Anna let out a moan. She felt so tight that I paused for a moment, letting her adjust before moving in a gentle rhythm. I reached around to cup her chest with one hand while the other found her sensitive spot, making her jump slightly before she settled into the sensation. The sensation was incredible. I held her hips and added a few light slaps, enjoying the way her suspender belt moved with each thrust. I could tell she was nearing a powerful climax, her body shaking and twisting as she reached her peak. That pushed me over the edge, and I followed, releasing into her as she buckled beneath me. When I finally pulled away, I saw the evidence of our passion slowly trailing down her thigh. We collapsed, catching our breath as I rested on her back. Wow, I didn't realize how much I needed that. I planned to keep you busy all night, she said with a laugh. We continued later that night and even the next morning. She was full of energy and incredibly vocal, both urging and praising. I felt entirely captivated by her. I returned home with mixed emotions, unsure of what to expect as I stepped carefully inside. Susan was in the kitchen. Mom called to say you were on your way back. Oh, did she mention anything else? Just that you were perfect in every way. Are you hungry? Would you like some breakfast? Yeah, that would be great. So we're okay? Susan remained calm and practical. We're fine. It wasn't cheating. We still love each other, and it sounds like Mom is already feeling better. Life seemed to go on as usual. We spoke about my time with Anna as if it were an everyday event, and Susan was genuinely pleased to see her mother in better spirits, noting how she seemed revitalized. Thankfully, she never asked for specifics. Susan seemed to return to her normal self, and I chose not to question it too much, relieved that things felt right again. Unfortunately, it didn't last. Over time, Susan became quiet and withdrawn once more. I worried she regretted letting me be with her mother. I tried to apologize and promised there wouldn't be a repeat, but she reassured me that she had no regrets. I called Anna, but she couldn't offer any insight into Susan's behavior either, though she assured me it had nothing to do with what we had done. Susan had even asked her mom about our night together and seemed genuinely pleased with how it had turned out. Despite my efforts, the sense of distance between us persisted and stretched into weeks as I tried everything I could think of to get back into Susan's favor.
How did this all start? It was a question that kept replaying in my mind. When the kids got older and became less dependent on me, I started going out with my best friend, Claire. Sometimes we met up with my nieces, Kate and Juliet. We only managed to do this once every few weeks when our schedules aligned, but I always had a great time. The girls were young, full of energy, and we all got along wonderfully. Claire was always lively and could chat with anyone, making the evenings even more enjoyable. Both of my nieces were attractive and drew a lot of attention, but what surprised me was that some of that attention was directed toward Claire and me as well. Claire, who had been divorced for 3 years, and the girls were seen as fair game, while I felt slightly out of place. I found myself enjoying the conversations and the playful jokes. The banter was light and funny, especially when the younger guys praised the qualities of older, experienced women. It was harmless fun, a way to escape my routine as a wife and mom. I never intended to cheat on Paul. It was just a way to unwind and feel noticed. One night, we found ourselves in a bit of trouble when some unfamiliar guys got a little too forward. I was concerned for the girls and tried to deal with a guy who kept leaning in to kiss me. I pushed him away and was about to throw my drink on him when, suddenly, he was yanked out of his seat and thrown to the floor. It took a moment to register what had happened. Standing across from the guy and his 3 friends was my rescuer, Edward Rochester, a wealthy client from work. He looked different without his business suit, imposing and confident. That confidence alone was enough to make the guys back off without a fight. I insisted that Edward join us, and we all thanked him repeatedly. The rest of the night passed in lively conversation. His stories were captivating. He had lived in various countries and had a successful career. But despite his interesting tales, he spent most of the time asking about us and encouraging the girls to pursue their dreams. He was inspiring. Kate and Juliet seemed completely taken with him, and I couldn't blame them. He was charming, handsome, and on that night, our hero. I saw him at work the next day, which was unusual since he typically only visited every couple of weeks. He was as charming as ever, and though I felt indebted to him, he insisted I stop thanking him. I mentioned how the girls were now full of ideas about traveling and taking a gap year after college. Talking to him made my stomach flutter in an unfamiliar way. I found myself checking my makeup and hoping for another chance to run into him. When we did meet again, he jokingly offered to chaperone me on our next night out to keep me out of trouble. I laughed, but ended up mentioning when we'd be going out next. My heart skipped a beat when I saw him at the bar. We talked, and he seemed genuinely interested in me, which left me feeling flattered. At first, my nieces encouraged me, saying there was no harm in having some fun and that he clearly liked me. It felt exciting, like being young again, when everything seemed possible and I wanted to go along with it. When we met up on our next night out, the girls seemed more cautious. They reminded me that they loved Uncle Paul and warned me not to do anything reckless. I didn't quite understand why they were worried. This wasn't serious after all. Claire was the one who caught me giving him a goodnight kiss. She scolded me, calling me an idiot and telling me to think about Paul. She warned me not to take things further and refused to join us if Edward was going to be there. I tried to put a stop to it, but Edward was constantly on my mind. He was so attractive, especially compared to Paul, who had let himself go a bit. Around that time, I came up with the idea for Paul to help my mom. I knew she was struggling with depression and had tried to hide her doctor visits from me. She needed something to bring her back to life, and Paul was the only person who seemed to brighten her mood and make her laugh. We would still see Edward occasionally, but I rejected any further advances from him. Things took a turn when our taxi didn't show up, and Edward offered us a ride home. After dropping off the girls, who looked concerned as they waved goodbye, Edward drove me the rest of the way. He pulled into a quiet spot near my house to let me out, but before I knew it, we were kissing. It felt thrilling, but guilt consumed me. I forced myself to stop and got out of the car, apologizing. I was overwhelmed by my conflicting emotions and barely held back tears when I saw Paul afterward. I kept declining Edward's invitations, but my resolve was weakening. I started convincing myself that meeting him for a drink wouldn't hurt. Then he surprised me with an invitation to a concert by my favorite singer, complete with a backstage pass and private meeting. I had spent weeks trying to get regular tickets without any luck. It was something I had always dreamed of experiencing. That invitation coincided with my decision to ask Paul to spend more time with my mom. I did it for her, mostly, but I couldn't deny that somewhere deep down the idea of having a safety net might have influenced me. The conversation didn't go as I'd envisioned. Paul remained infuriatingly calm. "Who is it, and why do you want to do this, Susan?" I tried to stay vague about what I was expecting. "Paul, I love you completely. This is just a one-time opportunity. It's mostly about the concert on Friday and maybe a chance to share something unique. The person doesn't really matter. You don't know him." I couldn't tell him the truth, that it was a wealthy, charming client from work who made me feel like a teenager caught up in his presence. Paul's voice brought me back to reality. "Don't pretend it's just about a concert. If you want to go with someone else, I won't stop you. There was no anger or threats of divorce, just a calm acceptance that left me feeling almost disappointed. He should have fought for me more, but then I had promised him there was no real risk of losing me. He just seemed sad. You had your time with my mom. Remember what we agreed? It's not cheating if we know about it, and I'll come back to you just like you did. You practically begged me to do that, and we both had choices. You're not giving me any choice here. The next few days were quiet. We barely spoke, and Paul kept himself busy. Still, he hadn't left or made any demands, which I took as a positive sign. Walking down the stairs carefully, I could feel Paul's eyes on me. The slit in my new dress opened up to my thigh as I descended, and I tried to subtly cover the tops of my stockings. When I reached the bottom in my strappy heels, Paul looked me over with disdain. You're certainly putting in the effort for him. Too bad you don't put the same effort into us. Are you really sure you want to do this? I nodded. You had your moment, and I think I deserve the same. Paul turned and walked away without saying another word. I took his silence as acceptance and decided not to press him on how he was feeling. It was better not to provoke him. I left, assuring him I'd be back by midnight. The concert was incredible, as was the Michelin-starred dinner beforehand. The intimacy afterward was good, though not quite what I'd hoped for. The thrill was more in the forbidden nature of it. He knew what he was doing, but it felt rehearsed and lacked real emotion. There was no intensity, and physically, he was no different from Paul. He asked me to stay the night, but I declined, glad to keep the promise I'd made to Paul. Staying longer might have made for a better experience, but I resisted. I made it home just in time, but the house was empty. It took me a moment to spot Paul's note on the fridge. Back tomorrow. I called his phone, but it went straight to a not available message. I figured he'd gone out drinking and was staying at a friend's place to cope, which seemed fair. It would give him some time to cool off. I had sprung this on him with very little notice. I went to bed but couldn't sleep. Usually if I felt restless, I'd cuddle up to Paul and drift off quickly. By 5 a.m., I gave up and got out of bed, and by 10 a.m., I had cleaned most of the house just to stay busy. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to say to Paul. He finally came home at 11 a.m., and he didn't look hungover. I'm sore. I don't want to hear it, Susan. I'm moving into the spare room. I love you more than anything. I said the last part to his back as he walked into the kitchen. I followed him, waiting for him to ask how my night had gone. I had all my answers prepared. It was nice, but not like what we had. No, he wasn't bigger. It was just a one-time thing, and there were no feelings. I still loved Paul and only Paul, but the questions never came. He stayed silent, making himself a mug of tea, and didn't offer one for me. In the end, I had to break the silence, though my attempt wasn't the most brilliant. Are you okay? Paul looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. I know last night must have been hard for you. I'm sorry. He raised his hand to stop me. No, you're not. This was all planned and intentional. At a loss for words, I asked in frustration, where did you go? That's the first time you've shown any interest in me. Everything has been about you. To answer your question, I went on a date and stayed the night. What? Are you serious? Don't worry, it was good. Great, actually. I have some feelings for her, but it's not love. Hearing my own prepared excuses echoed back at me, I snapped. You jerk! Who did you sleep with? That's no way to talk about your mother. No, it can't be true. She wouldn't do that. You're mine, and I'll confront her about this. Oh, like you're mine? Except when you want to be with Edward Rochester? How do you know his name? I know him, or rather, his wife. We've talked quite a bit over the last few days. He's married? Yeah, 12 years, apparently. She mentioned hiring investigators, photos, and divorce during a call yesterday. Oh, and something about taking him to the cleaners this time. What do you mean, this time? Come on, you didn't think you were the first, did you? Not even the fifth from what she says. This is a mess. I'm sorry, Paul. Can we move past this? I didn't cheat. You knew about it. It's cheating when you set me up from the start so you could be with him. Was that what the arrangement with your mom was about? A setup planned by you that I fell into without knowing? I called my mom, furious. How could you, Mom? Wake up, Susan. What did you expect your husband to do while you went off with a lover and rubbed his nose in it? It's better he was with me than someone else, or out drinking, or looking for your lover to get revenge. At least I could speak positively about you. How was he? Emotionally, I mean? How do you think? He was devastated and seems to know far more than you realize. Did you set this up just to have an affair? It wasn't really about me, was it? It was, Mom. I thought Paul would help you. I didn't know things would go this way with Edward. Well, I'm not sure I believe you, and Paul probably won't either. And by the way, what are you thinking? Paul is amazing in bed. Really? It felt like our intimacy life had become routine. Then you need to step it up, girl. He wasn't routine with me. Quite the opposite, actually. He's very attentive and adventurous. I've never known a man to be so considerate or enthusiastic about certain things. Mom, please, too much information. Paul glared at me. Why did you do it? That was the question I had dreaded. I knew the answer. It wasn't complicated, but admitting it would only make things worse. My life with Paul and the kids was great, but I did it because I wanted the thrill, the excitement, and the attention. I don't know, I guess things had become routine. I was flattered by the attention and his company felt exciting. I never intended to hurt you. I was attracted to Edward, but I didn't want to cheat. I thought you spending time with my mom was a fair balance so we could both try something new. What was so appealing about him? He was charming, confident, and handsome. He was different from you. But I never saw it as choosing him over you or thinking he was better. I never stopped loving you. We got along well. He's younger, successful, and honestly a nice guy. I stopped mid-sentence when Paul's head shot up, realizing just how foolish I was about to sound. A nice guy, sure. One who cheats and sleeps with married women, so younger. Was the Zex better? It wasn't better, just new. But it lacked the connection we have. So I'm not enough for you? No, that's not it at all. You're my husband, the father of my children, and the love of my life. You've mentioned before that you've gained some weight and need to get fit, but that doesn't change how I love you. Oh, so now it's my fault? I didn't know our marriage depended on me being thin. Maybe I should find someone who actually likes me. Paul, come on. You stay home, watch sports, and drink beer. Even with my mom, I had to set that up for you. The look on his face made me realize I had just said something terrible. You're unbelievable. I'm tired because I work myself to exhaustion, earning the money for the house and vacations you wanted, things a lover doesn't have to worry about. So not only did you have an affair, but you think I'm lazy, overweight, and unattractive. How would you feel if I said that to you? I'd feel awful. I didn't mean... I'm so sorry. Tears welled up, and I ran from the room, crying. I lay in bed replaying last night over and over, regretting how the conversation had spiraled. Cornered in trying to justify my actions, I'd only made things worse. Realizing I had blamed Paul was crushing. I felt ashamed. The worst part was none of it was true. Paul was strong and attractive. Sure, he'd gained a few pounds, but he wasn't overweight. I used to admire how hard he worked to provide for us. When had I forgotten that? Admitting to an affair, even a brief one, was bad enough, but trying to shift the blame onto him was despicable. And implying he couldn't attract other women was hurtful and untrue. I had hurt him just to deflect my own guilt. It was shallow and cruel. I must have lost my mind to say such things. Why did I do it in the first place? Maybe deep down, I wanted to take a risk with Edward. I was frustrated with our limitations and financial worries. Someone as ambitious and successful as Edward was tempting. But I didn't want to lose everything, and I didn't want to truly cheat. I thought that if Paul spent time with my mom, he wouldn't have grounds to complain. It felt like a chance to explore something different. Edward turned out to be less than I'd imagined. Handsome and wealthy, yes, but lacking something deeper. The entire plan now seemed absurd. I worried Paul might never forgive me. I knew I needed to start making things right immediately, so I went to find him. I found him in the kitchen. It didn't mean anything. Maybe not to you, but it means a lot to me. He made me feel special, like I was more than just a housewife and mother. And what about my drab and boring life? Going to work every day, taking every bit of overtime just to keep us going, so tired that all I can manage is eating and falling asleep on the couch? I didn't think about that. Clearly. Well, I need to reevaluate everything too. I've been working so hard not to fail and not to let you down that I forgot about myself. I'm done with all the overtime. I need a better work-life balance and more time for me. You might need to cut back on your spending, maybe go out less or get Edward to pay for it. I won't see him again. Wow, thanks. That's generous of you. I'm touched. I couldn't seem to say anything right. I tried talking to my mom again, attempting to explain myself, but I was just as unsuccessful as I was with Paul. When I admitted that our bed life had become pretty routine, my mom seemed confused. I was shocked when she mentioned that Paul had given her multiple pleasure and had performed well multiple times in one night. She asked what I did to keep things interesting in the bedroom, and I had no answer. No, I didn't own any lingerie, and I rarely engaged in oral sex. Having him kiss or touch me intimately felt a little too risque to me. Good grief, Susan. Are you going to tell me next that you just lie there with your eyes closed? I didn't want to respond to that. It hit too close to the truth. I tried calling Claire for advice and support, but she barely spoke to me, asking if I was out of my mind and reminding me that she had warned me multiple times not to get involved with Edward. Her parting words caught me off guard. Paul is a good friend, a good man, and he deserved better from you. Paul started spending more and more time out of the house, and I figured out he wasn't out drinking or moping but was actually going to the gym every night. One weekend, he dusted off his old road bike and began going for rides, which grew longer over time. He said it felt great, made him feel healthier and more focused. He even joined a cycling club and started meeting people from different backgrounds who shared his newfound passion. He reconnected with his friends, getting back into sports and hiking, along with social activities. I found myself missing him, missing the comfort of our conversations and cuddles. I needed the support of my strong, steady husband. I was trapped by my own mistakes and didn't know how to fix things. We almost bumped into each other at the bathroom door. Paul had just taken a shower and stood there with a towel wrapped around him. He looked great, better than I remembered. The weight loss hadn't taken much given his active job, and he looked toned. I felt an unexpected wave of attraction, which hit me hard. You look really good. I only said you were a bit overweight. You don't need to be at the gym all the time. One reason you slept with another man was because I was fat. Well, your exact word was podgy, wasn't it? I cringed internally. I didn't mean it that way. I'm sorry I said it. It was as if he didn't hear me. His voice had an edge, carrying a quiet anger. But you were right. I wish you'd said something sooner. We could have worked on it together. But now I'm doing it for myself, not for you. He brushed past me and shut his bedroom door. The counseling started in a typical manner with the question of what we wanted to achieve. I answered, I want to repair the damage in our relationship, rebuild the trust and love, and get back to how we used to be. Okay, we'll explore that further. And you, Mr. Edmonds? I want a partner who respects me, someone I can trust. I felt relieved. It seemed like we wanted the same thing and he was still open to staying together. I already respected him and believed I could earn back his trust. Then Paul continued, but I don't want to go back to the way things were. It would be foolish to repeat the same mistakes that got us here. Susan called me fat and lazy, and that lack of respect allowed her to cheat. As for trust, I don't know how I could ever feel that again. The counselor asked if I wanted to respond. I was stunned, trying to process his words, but I managed to speak. I didn't see it that way. It wasn't a logical decision. Maybe there's some truth to what you're saying. I lost sight of all the good things and everything you do for us, but I never stopped loving you. Maybe you do love me, but you made it clear you weren't attracted to me. That's not true. I am attracted to you. You look incredible. And what if I gain a few pounds again or get worn out from work? Nothing would change. I'd try to support you better and be a better wife. But it did change. You didn't like what you saw and looked for something else, someone younger, fitter, and probably with a bigger... He wasn't bigger. And it wasn't about that. We are good together. Is the lovemaking what you can't get past? It's everything. But yes, you made sure I knew you enjoyed yourself, so the emphasis on the sex is part of it. It wasn't like the love we have. I think I deserve someone who finds me irresistible and can't wait to pull me into bed, the way you did with him. But I do find you attractive. Do you? Honestly, you never put much effort into our bedroom life. Most of the time you just lie there like I should feel grateful for being close to you. When was the last time you pulled me into the bedroom? Why does it always feel like I'm asking for a favor? What? Seriously, I thought our intimacy life was good. Yeah, my experience with Anna made me realize there was no passion. Maybe that's what you were searching for. Maybe you were different with him. But I wasn't different. It was like it is with you. The counselor suggested a break to let us cool off. I was still trying to process what Paul had said and remembered my mom's advice about upping my game. I knew we needed to move forward. Going in circles wouldn't help. Paul, I'll keep saying this. I'm sorry. I will never do anything like that again. It was selfish and foolish. Yeah, but I bet it's a memory you'll want to hold on to, your guilty little secret. Or will you share it as fond stories and jokes with your friends? I wouldn't do that. I just want to move past it. We can't keep hurting each other. I want us to really come back together. Paul paused, clearly processing something. I'm not trying to hurt you, but I need to focus on what's right for me, not just for you. In some ways, you were right. I don't like who I am, and I need to figure that out for myself. How can you think that? You're the best man I know, strong and caring. I didn't mean any of what I said. I was looking for excuses. It's my fault you feel this way. Let me help fix it. Maybe you could have before, but not now. You're making it harder, not easier. I need to respect myself first. A lot of my strength came from being with you, and maybe I became too dependent. Please don't say that. I'm still here and would do anything for you. I never thought it would come to this. The sessions didn't help. He just couldn't get past what I'd done. That was difficult enough. But what really hurt was that he couldn't let go of the things I'd said to justify my actions. I did find him attractive and respected him, but he refused to believe it. I still don't really get why. I can blame being a mother, boredom, or losing sight of things. But the truth is the opportunity was there, and I wasn't strong enough to turn it down. That's a terrible reason to end a marriage. I can't forgive you. We're done. I want a divorce. The reality of the situation set in, and I realized I was losing this battle. I understand. I'm really sorry. I still love you and would do anything to stay together, but I see that's not possible now. Paul looked at me, unsure, likely wondering if I was just trying to bluff or if I was truly letting go. So, you win. You had your fling with the rich guy, and now you're free to run off with him. I'll be stuck living in a tiny place, barely able to afford it, seeing my kids once a month, and you'll probably make even that difficult. What did I ever do to deserve this? I would never do that to you, Paul. I still love you. I'll agree to whatever you need financially. You're a great dad, and they need you now more than ever. You could see them whenever you want. I know this is all my fault. Those words seemed to catch him off guard. He looked confused, nodding with uncertainty. I decided to go along with whatever Paul wanted, including starting the divorce. I would comply, but not fight too hard, and was determined to stay friends with him. I hoped that over time his anger would fade. If I handled the separation perfectly, maybe, just maybe, I could win him back. Paul was such a good man and remained fair during our initial separation. I stayed in the house with the kids, supported by his payments. He had visitation every other weekend, but I encouraged him to spend as much time with the kids as he wanted, which he truly appreciated. I was determined to stay strong and survive, even if this ended in divorce. I was independent and attractive. I kept in touch with Edward, who was speeding toward his own divorce and trying to minimize the damage. He wanted us to be together. At first, I thought of him as an upgrade from Paul, but that idea shattered when I learned he was married, turning him into a fallback option at best. Things with Edward went downhill quickly. His arrogance and superiority came out fast, and it was no surprise his wife told me I was welcome to him. He didn't have as much money as I assumed, and he stood to lose most of it in the divorce. Who has 5 kids these days anyway? Edward soon seemed like a poor substitute for Paul. It made me appreciate what I had taken for granted. I'd forgotten how much I relied on Paul's quiet reassurance and emotional support. He was so easygoing and never complained about what I suggested. Paul and I managed to remain on good terms and stayed friendly. I noticed he still glanced at me now and then, so I dressed to catch his attention more. One night, I saw Paul out with the group of friends we used to join for social outings. I kept glancing over, but he hadn't noticed me yet. He was as reserved as ever, but when he spoke, people listened and laughed, making him the center of attention without much effort. He looked great, slimmer, tanned, and like he'd received some style advice from a woman. I wondered how I had once focused on the negatives and minor annoyances while overlooking the good. I missed so much about him. His unwavering support, his unconditional love, and frankly, he looked amazing sitting there. When he went to the bar to get more drinks, I gathered the courage to approach him. "Hi, Paul." He looked surprised but quickly composed himself. "Hello, Susan. It's nice to see you." "Thank you, you too. It's good to see you out with friends. I've always done that. You just stopped coming out with us. You should come over and say hi to everyone. I hesitated, unsure of their reaction. Paul was always well-liked, and I knew I had let him down. I can't do that. I'm embarrassed because of what I did. They'll be fine with you. No one took sides, and I'm sure they'd be glad to see you. In just a few words, Paul made me realize everything I had lost, and I knew I wanted my husband back at any cost. Thankfully, we were only separated, not divorced, so I still had a chance. He had just been so kind to me, which had to mean there were still feelings there. Do you have to be so perfect, Paul? Can't you let me have something to hold on to? You're allowed to be bitter and angry with me. I deserve it. We have kids, Susan. We need to move forward and be good to each other for their sake. I always knew you were a good man, Paul. I didn't realize you were practically a saint. Not quite. Remember your mother. Yes, but even then I practically begged you to do it, and you always did what I wanted. I ended things with Edward for good. It was time to stop playing both sides and focus on winning back my husband. Strangely enough, Edward didn't seem to care at all. He even had the nerve to say I was his biggest mistake and that he lost his wife over a terrible fling. What a cheeky comment. I made sure to spend more time with Paul and the kids. He was an amazing father, so protective and caring, always making them laugh and showing a level of patience I couldn't match. We talked more, and I often kissed his cheek when he left with the kids. I stayed away from dating and made sure Paul knew that. I also let him know that plenty of men were interested in me, but none matched the standard he had set, and that was true. My plan to win Paul back was working, and I knew the idea of being a united family again was powerful for him. If I could get him back, I would be the best wife possible. I even had my mom talk to Paul while I listened on speakerphone. She started by admitting I had been foolish and knew it. I just can't get over it, Anna. It's more about the trust than the sex. She completely blindsided me. She loves you, Paul. Please go back to her and the kids. She was reckless and selfish, but she's devastated. I'm genuinely worried about her. She needs you. I nodded silently, agreeing. The things she said, I don't even know if she likes me. Fat, lazy, all that nonsense. My mom gave me a stern look, making sure I remembered my mistakes. You know she didn't mean any of that, Paul. She was just trying to justify herself. Please go back for the kids or as a favor to me. I like you, Anna, and you're the most attractive woman I've known. But what we had showed me that something was missing between Susan and me. I just don't think she was ever truly passionate about me, which is probably why she set us up and cheated. I almost shouted, no, but held my tongue. I'm sure that's not true, Paul. If it would help get you both back together, we could work something out. I did enjoy our time together, Anna, but that wouldn't be right. Maybe if I had resisted more, Susan and I would still be together. Besides, you deserve to find someone special to share your life with. You'd have no shortage of suitors. That's kind of you, Paul. Thank you. Our time really did mean a lot to me. After the call, my mom reminded me that I was married to a wonderful man and suggested it might be better for us both to move on. My plan to use my mom as leverage had backfired, showing Paul what he had been missing intimately. It was infuriating and completely frustrating. I wanted the chance to spoil him, win him back, and reignite the passion between us. Despite my efforts to win Paul back, the divorce process kept moving forward. We were set to meet at a restaurant to sign the papers, but I had a different plan in mind. I wore a designer dress, new lingerie, and heels, wanting to look my best. I noticed Paul's gaze on me, sending a shiver through me. Nice outfit. Is that to show off what I'm losing, or are you just here to gloat? There's no gloating here, Paul. The outfit is for you. I want you to notice me again. Paul looked puzzled. Let's just get this over with. I've already signed the papers. Here, take them. Maybe we shouldn't sign them yet. You've got to be kidding. What are you talking about? I'm talking about staying together as a family. We're meant for each other. I don't want to see anyone else, and I'm hoping there's still a chance for us. I love you. It's that simple. I didn't realize how much until now, and I was a fool to risk losing you. Deep down, I know you still love me too. I was never enough for you. You always wanted more things, more money. We built the life you wanted, and then you suddenly didn't want it anymore. You stopped spending time with our friends and preferred shopping and nights out with your girlfriends. None of that matters to me now, Paul. I just want our family back. Quit your job if you want. We'll find a way to make it work. I'm happy with my life now. You weren't, so there's no point going back. I want our life together more than anything. My time with Edward was a terrible mistake. I'd do anything you wanted, even in the bedroom. I should have been more open with you instead of looking elsewhere. Even my mom still speaks highly of you. Until the next wealthy, charming man shows up with a smile and a credit card. That dress doesn't hide who you really are inside. The comment stung. That won't happen, Paul. Neither of us is seeing anyone, and I know you're still attracted to me. Who says I'm not seeing anyone? I'm taking Claire out tonight. We've been spending time together, but she wanted to wait until these papers were signed before going any further. Claire, my friend Claire, you can't be serious. Oh, I'm serious. We've been talking since before your fling. How do you think I found out about Edward? I thought his wife contacted you. No, I reached out to her after your little plan was revealed. She already suspected him. Claire was the one who warned me about what you were planning. She tried to talk sense into you multiple times, but you were determined, so she stopped going out with you. She thought telling me would stop it, but we both underestimated how stubborn and selfish you were. I was speechless. I couldn't believe Claire had told him and was now with him. Paul continued. And she doesn't think I'm fat either. Funny how life turns out. Claire always thought you were lucky to have me. We decided to be cautious for the kids' sake, but I will be seeing her. Turns out some women do find me attractive. He finished with, I took a long, hard look at myself and realized my only mistake was loving you. Sign the papers, Susan. We're done. The divorce went through and there was little I could do to stop it. I often saw Paul and Claire together. They looked genuinely happy and my kids adored her. She was always fun. I try to be happy for Paul because he deserves it. But deep down, it's hard not to feel that it's unfair. He should be mine. Maybe if I keep being kind, I'll find my way back to him someday.